It's 3 minutes after 10. I'd sometimes say things on the programme that are mostly rhetorical. And yesterday I offered up to explain to anybody who was confused about why the events of the previous day had caused such a thickening of response, such a complete transformation of public discourse in the context of Israel and Gaza. And I offered to explain it. And actually, quite a few of you have asked me to. And I thought I had yesterday, but looking back, it was a fairly meagre explanation. My slightly odd obsession with the idea of your ears pricking up when your own hometown gets mentioned in the news, and the inevitable multiplication of concern, multiplication of care when people from your own country, and this applies to everybody, this applies to government, to media, to civilian, to citizen. People from your own country are killed even if there's a natural disaster, a tsunami or an earthquake. If someone from Britain is killed, it will get much, 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 much more coverage, to a factor of millions, than the death of the natives of the country where the tragedy has hit. And I thought that was fairly self-explanatory. I thought that was fairly clear, and I still do. But here's the thing. I don't want to say even I, because that sort of casts me in some sort of superior role, but I can't think of a better way of putting it. Even I am surprised today by the last 24 hours. You heard Sir Alan Duncan, I think someone who just about deserves that overused phrase, Tory grandee, speaking in language I've never heard before, I don't think, from a conservative politician. And you have heard reports of the open letter sent by 3 former Supreme Court justices, including a former president of the Supreme Court, and some 600 lawyers, academics, and retired senior judges, warning in the strongest of terms that the government is breaching international law by continuing to arm Israel. You can read this letter. I'll tweet it for you if you want. It runs to 17 pages. It was sent last night, and it amounts to a legal opinion. Here is the gist of it. While we welcome the increasingly robust calls by your government for a cessation of fighting and the unobstructed entry to Gaza of humanitarian assistance. It's odd. Even yesterday we took a call from someone insisting that the UK government was still fully supportive of what was happening in Gaza. To be that detached from observable reality is heartbreaking and horrifying at the same time. Simultaneously to continue the sale of weapons and weapons systems to Israel and to maintain threats of suspending UK aid, UNRWA falls significantly short of your government's obligations under international law. Now, you'll probably be able to find somebody who spends their life doing sort of, conveyancing with their solicitor's qualifications and writing occasional articles for The Spectator to claim that the most august collection of former Supreme Court judges, academics, and retired senior judges, not to mention working lawyers, don't know what they're talking about. So you could bring a Brexit element to it. You could find the legal equivalent of Patrick Minford to come out and say, this just isn't true, this is outrageous, this is ridiculous. But at some point, gravity has to kick in. You have to respect the fact that Brenda Hale and her co-signatories to this letter have spent much of their professional lives addressing precisely these kind of issues. And they have made it absolutely crystal clear what the accusation, what the state of play is. And as I mentioned, for someone like Alan Duncan to break cover in the way that he has in the last 24 hours is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And on a much, much lighter note, how do you stop yourself overusing a word? It's been pointed out, mostly by Sheila Fogarty's producer, that I've started saying the word extraordinary an extraordinary amount of times in the last 2 or 3 months. And I would like to cease this extraordinary behaviour as soon as is plausible or feasible. But I just caught myself. I must have said it 6 times already this morning. Maybe we live in extraordinary times, and isn't that a James song? And there is no other word that fits the bill quite so perfectly. But here we are. Okay, the killing of 3 British aid workers, very deliberately. I'm afraid there is no wriggle room there. The nature of the attack, which is described in forensic detail in various media this morning, and indeed was yesterday, makes it impossible to claim a form of error. You can claim we didn't mean to do it in some sort of overarching way, but you can't claim we didn't mean to do it in that moment. And reports from Israel tell us that the breakdown in discipline on the front line, that regional commanders essentially pursue their own idea of what is and what is not a justified target, is a crucial part of the tragedy. But to see the speed and the strength with which professional opinion has turned against Israel has taken me by surprise. I didn't think I was going to be surprised. I was surprised when Nick yesterday called for the arms sales to Israel to stop. I'm sure he won't mind me describing him as somebody who has historically been very full-throated in his support of most actions of the Israeli governments, successive Israeli governments, up to and including Benjamin Netanyahu's. I opened the Daily Mail of all papers today, and this headline in some ways is incredibly significant because it sounds as, I mean, it's 6 months ago. It would have been, I think, in The Guardian or somewhere like that. But Stephen Glover, one of their more vampiric columnists, he talks about being a great supporter of Israel, but having reached a point where he has to call for them to stop what they are currently doing. The intervention, as I mentioned, of Alan Duncan, calling for Conservative colleagues to be thrown out of the House of Lords. I'm a supporter of Israel, says Stephen Glover in the Mail. And he's got page 14. He's got the main op-ed position, or arguably the second most important op-ed position, with the most important currently addressing the question of what to do if you're faced by a herd of killer cows. Yeah, more evidence of the journalistic genius of the current editor of the Daily Mail. But historically, this piece here, next to the op-eds, next to the comment column, is the sort of voice of the paper. I'm a supporter of Israel, but there comes a point when the killing wreaked on innocent people outweighs the original sin. A word on the original sin, the brutal, bloody, disgusting murder and kidnapping of hostages by Hamas on October the 7th, some 1,200 people killed in brutal circumstances. But that phrase there, on that page, in that paper, outweighs the original sin, addresses the question we've been asking on this programme forever, pretty much since it started, is at what point does the response outweigh the provocation? At what point does the response outweigh the original sin? It's a great phrase, that, actually, in this context. So why? In your view, why? Because all that really changed was the passport of the killed. All that really changed on Tuesday was the nationality of the entirely innocent aid workers plural, killed by Israeli ordnance. All that really changed was a word on a passport. And that word became British. And because 3 British aid workers were killed in circumstances with which everybody in the Gaza Strip is already grimly familiar, the whole country, from the Prime Minister down, has undertaken what looks like a quite extraordinary U-turn. And I know bits of the answer to the question why, but I don't know all of it, and I'm not sure anybody does. But if we can assemble lots and lots of bits, then we'll get a fairly clear idea of what's happened. So why has the killing of John Chapman and his colleagues, and yesterday we heard testimony from the families of the dead, the families of John Chapman and James Kirby and the friends, and there was one in particular, I don't know if you heard it, a former colleague talking about thinking it would be his mate when he heard the name on the news, and remembering his mate. And this would be a former member of the Special Forces. And that catch in his voice broke me. And yet why did it break me? When I have seen footage of dead children, I've seen footage of siblings, children orphaned, mourning the killing of their parents. It's weird. That's personal, that's emotional. But Paul uses a good phrase, actually, as I say the word emotional. He talks about emotional proximity. It changes the impact. Yeah, but not to this degree. Not to the point that a former Conservative cabinet minister comes out and calls for his Conservative colleagues to be removed from the House of Lords. That 600 lawyers, academics, former judges suddenly join forces to essentially accuse the UK government of breaking international law, of aiding and abetting Israel in an unsustainable and unjustifiable course. So I don't know, Johnny, if the whiteness of the aid workers matters. We had this conversation yesterday. I don't know how helpful it is to have it again today. I think that when the names were first revealed on the radio, I was not aware of the ethnicity of the men killed, and they were names that could quite easily have belonged to people of a different colour. But I hesitate to accuse you of banging that drum a little too heavily and a little too quickly. I don't think it would matter. I think the crucial word here is British, not white. But the change has been extraordinary. Absolutely, to me, almost unbelievable. So what's happened? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Why has everything changed so quickly? And the examples I've given you, I think, are irrefutable. I don't think you can accuse me this morning of exaggerating as it hasn't changed that much at all. You know, even if all of your news only comes from LBC, you've heard Nick calling for arms sales to Israel to stop. You've heard our news bulletins detailing the words of Sir Alan Duncan, a former Tory cabinet minister, a Tory grandee, calling for other Tory peers to be essentially thrown out of the party, thrown out of the House of Lords. And then you have the 600 academics, lawyers, former judges, describing our government, which of course is full of people who were perfectly comfortable breaking international law in a very limited and specific way during the dog days of Brexit, of doing so by continuing to support Israel through the sale of arms. And you have that frankly bizarre tension mentioned in the letter where we're threatening to cease forms of support while continuing to provide weaponry. So take a moment and tell me why. Why? In the space of half an hour on Tuesday, support for Israel in the UK disappeared. 0345 6060 973. Tomorrow, or possibly in the second hour of today's programme, we will look at how that feels for people who feel in their blood and their bones the necessity of the existence and the survival of the modern state of Israel. Because even as some of the people who claim to speak for you queue up to attack and abuse people like me and accuse us of all manner of things, my heart bleeds for you. My heart absolutely bleeds for what the relationship between generational trauma and Benjamin Netanyahu's hemorrhaging of decades of support and goodwill leaves you feeling. And we will, I promise you, examine that at some point in the coming days. But today I want to look at the moment, the immediacy of this moment, and the frankly unprecedented speed and strength of support disappearance, support dilution. Why? 0345 6060 973. 90 minutes after 10, a quick text, and then we'll get stuck into the phone calls. And the person who sent this has asked me to respect their anonymity, which I'm more than happy to do. Good morning, James. I wish to remain anonymous, but I was in Royal Marine training and served with James Henderson, and this is such a tragic loss. He was an exceptional Marine, and I'm still in shock about what has happened. They were working for a security company tasked with protecting the aid workers. Nevertheless, this should not have happened. The West condoned Israel in doing whatever it took to eradicate Hamas. This gave Israel carte blanche to do whatever they wanted. I have not agreed with the UK involvement or their backing of Israel from day one. And as much as it pains me to say, this was always going to happen. Israel is doing to Gaza what Russia is doing to Ukraine and China is doing to Taiwan. I thought it was important to read that out, given the provenance of the contributor. But the question we're addressing more directly this morning is this. Why has this event, these killings, changed everything so much and so quickly? Let's start in Brentford. Richard's there. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello, Richard.
It's really interesting, this. I don't think it's a sudden process.
No.
I mean, I've been reluctantly supportive of what the Israelis have been doing. No need to go into the reasons, but generally,
yes.
I've thought they're in the right. But I've had reservations, and I've listened to other arguments, and gradually, those kind of come into the foreground more. And then this is so bad on, I think, at least 2 counts that it kind of tips you over. And I think it's a bit like ice, isn't it?
Go on.
If you've got ice at -3 and it warms up to -2, -1, you don't see anything. When it goes beyond 0 to 1, it melts. So, what you're seeing, I don't think is a sudden change. I think it's gradual.
Well, yeah, with me, you remind me of 2 things, actually. The first is that as the self-crowned king of absolutely appalling analogies, I don't get to criticise yours at all. and the second is that I've actually asked, without realising it, I've asked 2 questions this morning. I've asked to account for our personal shift in opinion or in support, and to account for the meta shift, for the bigger shifting, because I don't think your analysis applies to the government, does it, or the Daily Mail, or some normally reliably one-eyed supporters of Israel's foreign policy, whatever it may be and wherever it may take them. And that's good. I want both, but you're describing yourself. Is there a sense then that, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, I'm wondering more broadly whether quite a lot of people have reached a point in the last few months where they knew what was happening was wrong, but they didn't feel emboldened enough to say so for reasons, including the vicious attacks and accusations of anti-Semitism that are visited upon anybody who dares to say anything remotely critical of the Israeli government, or that double down theory, that sense of, well, then if I'm not supporting them in March, maybe I shouldn't have been supporting them in October.
Oh, I don't know. It's just so complicated.
Yeah.
I agree with you about, let's forget the Daily Mail. And you're absolutely right with certain types of people, Duncan, God knows why they suddenly changed their mind. All I'd say to you is I've listened to all the arguments.
Yes.
And I've thought the Israelis, although they've committed wrong, they kind of accepted that, whereas most Palestinians get very upset, and they don't appear to me to see the other side. And so I've come down on the side of that event, that first event was wrong, and it's never been acknowledged, and the hostages have never been released. If that would have happened, maybe it would have been resolved.
Maybe at an earlier point. I don't agree. I respect your position. Netanyahu latterly, of course, has said that even in the event of a fully negotiated ceasefire and hostage release, he still would have launched his ground offensive into Rafah, and members of his war cabinet going considerably further than him. But we're back to yesterday's problem of having to rely upon really incredibly one-sided reporting coming out of Gaza. But yeah, I mean, the idea that people in the Gaza Strip are not as outraged or condemning of the events of October the 7th as we would expect them to be is a point that stands. Whether or not we would think differently if we understood more, I don't know. But there it is. There's a shift. And it hasn't happened overnight in one sense, but in another sense, it very much has. And that's what confuses, I think, both of us, Richard and me. Craig's in Doncaster. Craig, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I was just in answer to your question, and I don't say this as an excuse. I say it as an explanation.
Yes.
I when you first asked your question, the thing that jumped immediately to my mind was not in my backyard or NIMBY. But when you said emotional proximity, that probably explained it more for me. Like it is British people, and it's not an excuse because the loss of life should be universally abhorrent, but because it's now squarely in our backyard. I think that's what's changed. People's response to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously right up to a point, aren't you? But it has to go a little bit deeper than that, because what it has to do, the fact that British people were killed, has to have changed our attitude, in a sense, to killing period. Killing full stop, not just to these killings, because the killing of these people sort of throws into disarray the attempt to claim that things were being done responsibly or carefully or somehow, as I've heard, that everybody dying in Gaza deserved to die. I've heard some quite prominent figures on both sides of the Atlantic essentially go there. And that seems to have been undone by this killing, but also by the incredible deliberate detail of it as well. The attempt, any attempt to pass it off as friendly fire or accidental collateral damage was dead in the water before the story even reached the news wires. That changes everything, I think.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But the other thing that so I listen to you religiously most days. I drive a lot for work, so you're on when I'm driving.
Thank you.
But I try and remain a silent sort of observer in this, because there's no way to approach this issue without upsetting somebody.
Yes, tell me about it.
The thing that really jarred me about this was, and I know that it's disproportionate, the amount of ordnance that America supplies to Israel compared to us is a massive difference. But just the chance that British people could have been killed by British ordnance really jarred me.
Oh, did it? That's very personal, isn't it? That's the thing that got you. I don't know that would explain the shift in position of some commentators or columnists, but for you, the idea that British civilians, I think they are civilians, ex-servicemen, British civilians could have been killed by British. I don't think they were, for the record. I think we know exactly what technology was used in it, and it doesn't have British provenance, but that's a detail, isn't it? Because it could have been, because we are providing arms to the people that killed.
The chance was there. Yeah.
Whew. Craig, thank you, mate. 27 minutes. Do you have a military background yourself at all?
I don't know.
No, I don't know why I asked that. Something about your voice made me think that you might, or indeed your determination to remain most of the time above the fray. 27 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Why so quickly? And why so complete? So you can begin to get your head around the quickly. It's pretty much based upon the nationality of the dead, although, of course, 4 other aid workers were also killed in the attack with a variety of backgrounds. There was an Australian national called Zomi Frankum, Damian Sobol, who was a Polish national, Saif Issam Abu Taha, a Palestinian, and Jacob Flickinger, a US Canadian, alongside John Chapman, James Kirby, and James Henderson. But so the speed, perhaps, is more attributable to the nationality of the 3 British people killed. But the completeness of it, the fact that people who I don't think have ever said boo to an IDF goose before, they've turned on this one. And maybe it's a bit navel-gazing of me as a member of the media to be so interested in why the media has moved so completely, but I am, and I'm interested in your explanation. 2 Richards already this morning. This one's in Nottingham. Richard, what would you like to say?
Well, all it is, as far as I'm concerned, if you take what's going on in Gaza, it's like it's as far away as the moon. Although we've got 24-hour coverage, we see all this. But now, suddenly, we've got nationals from Europe and America, and it's almost as if these killings have taken place in this country, and we're suddenly awake to the fact we've got British people and Europeans involved in it. And the point is that the majority of people in this country want it stopped. And all it is, you've suddenly got politicians and newspapers waking up to the idea, well, maybe it better, we've got to get this stopped.
Do you think so? I mean, there's so much coverage. But you still felt that it was happening more than an arm's length away?
Personally, no.
Right,
Personally, no.
But you're speculating on the motivation of others. I mean, partly perhaps as a consequence of the fact that we haven't got British journalists in there. We haven't got foreign. We haven't got John Simpson and Jeremy Bowen.
It's still at arm's length until now, and then suddenly everybody's waking up and saying, "Well, this is got to stop."
And that would work. That would work on the man on the Clapham omnibus, wouldn't it?
Oh yes,
Richard. But it doesn't. It doesn't work on the editor of the Daily Mail or on broadcasters who've never said boo to an IDF goose before, suddenly calling for arms sales to be stopped. So what's happened to them?
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, we know the Mail is about as fascist as you can get, but the point is they've had to wake up to it. They've had to wake up to it. That things have gone far enough now. And quite frankly, if the Americans was to turn around to the Israelis and say, you stop now, or it's a complete arms embargo, I think maybe we might start to get somewhere.
Well, I don't know. It's an extraordinary... I've got to stop saying extraordinary, Richard. I don't know what's happened to me. I've got a sort of form of reflex action. But yeah, maybe. And that's emotional proximity translated into geographical proximity. If you combine that early text we got with Richard's contribution, you meld the two together. It feels emotionally closer because they're British, but it feels geographically closer as well. It takes away the sense of detachment. And I do believe that sense of detachment has been created and enforced by the refusal of the Israeli regime to allow British foreign correspondents. I'm talking about British media consumers not really having a full sense of what's been going on is clearly a deliberate plan, isn't it? Can we agree about that? It's a deliberate tactic to deprive British media consumers of some facts and some footage and some detail by not allowing people like Jeremy Bowen and John Simpson, Katya Adler, Lise Doucette, Christiane Amanpour over at CNN, Secunda Kamani at Channel 4 News, Matt Fry at Channel 4 News, all manner of absolutely world-class foreign correspondents, all prevented from getting into Israel. And that perhaps explains the detachment that Richard describes. But somehow this killing has destroyed the detachment, perhaps. 10:32. Lottie Morley's here with your headlines. 10:35 is the time. If you're just joining us, we're looking at the speed and the strength of the dilution at best, disappearance at worst, at most, I suppose. Dilution at least, disappearance at most. Words are important. Of support for the IDF, for the current Israeli government in its Gaza offensive, and the obvious fact that killing of 3 British aid workers has changed everything. We're just examining the question of why it has changed so much so quickly. Peter in Finchley puts it particularly well. Sadly, he writes, there tends to be a default starting position in this country of Muslims bad, Israel good. However, there's only so long that people can ignore the evidence of what's happening. This senseless killing of the 3 British aid workers has now made it impossible to justify what Israel is doing. And maybe it is a bit like a straw that broke a camel's back or something, that sense in your soul, in your conscience, that this isn't justifiable, but you couldn't really go there because you'd been so outspoken previously in your support, because you've been historically so supportive, because you feel keenly that relationship between generational trauma, Holocaust, pogrom, persecution, and the modern state of Israel, which informs well-meaning and important support for the state of Israel historically. You didn't want to step back from that position for powerful and comprehensible reasons. But you have known for some time that you were defending the indefensible. And the killing of the 3 British aid workers by the IDF in such a deliberate fashion just almost liberated people to say what they have feared and thought for some time. I don't know. I'd just clarify one thing that Peter says about that line, Muslims bad, Israel good. I mean, Hamas evil, Israel good is one interpretation of it, but it's the conflation of terrorists with everybody up to and including middle-aged mums pushing their prams through central London to call for peace in Gaza. People describing them as Hamas sympathisers, people describing them as hate marchers. Our own Home Secretary, as was, describing them as hate marchers. So, if you need proof of the insidiousness of that attempt to conflate everybody calling for peace with actual terrorism, I'm afraid it's been unfolding in front of you now for the best part of 6 months, from the highest levels of the UK government down. 10:38 is the time. Kieran's in Cork. Kieran, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you? Well, I'm not British, so I can't comment on the kind of emotional strength of 3 former British military people being killed. And the days when Irish people are celebrating the death of British soldiers are over, thank God, and we're all happy about that. So I do understand it a bit. But what I think is it's changed across the world. Like, people demonstrating outside Netanyahu's house in Israel, like across the world, the argument that they're targeting Hamas when they're killing food workers going into Gaza is just finished. Like, it's over. Can't make that argument.
And so people perhaps were clinging onto it by a gossamer thread previously because of the number of aid workers of different nationalities that had already been killed, the number of journalists that had already been killed, the number of civilians very violently disputed or even perhaps distorted by some of the coverage, claims that they're really, really careful and a third of them are terrorists. That claim seems to be falling apart the more we learn about the Lavender AI system. But until this tragedy, this atrocity, you could cling by a gossamer thread to the idea that they were doing what they said they were doing.
Barely. I mean, personally speaking, I couldn't.
No, I know, but we're imagining the thought processes of the people that have never said boo to an IDF goose before, now calling for weapons sales to be stopped.
I mean, there's just simply no argument. They're punishing a whole population, 2.5 million people in a very small area. And
that is, it's not for us to sit in judgment on that. That's your opinion and your description, but that would constitute a collective punishment, which would constitute a war crime, which is, part of the rationale for the 600 academics, retired senior judges and lawyers concluding that the UK government is now breaching international law by continuing to arm Israel.
100%. Logically, rationally, that's what's happening. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's
I do know what you mean. And what's do you have enough of a handle on it to compare British media to Irish media? Has it been a slightly different story in Ireland, or do you hear?
It is very different.
Tell me how.
Very different.
Tell me how.
Basically, Irish people collectively, anyway, our history, our colonial history and blah, 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 which you all know quite well.
Blah, blah, blah. There you go. I got an A-level in that. Go on.
But, it's just, it's the same as the South Africans. It's no irony that we've signed up to the South African case in the ICJ because we understand this. This is colonialism. This is ethnic cleansing. This is trying to control a territory. And
that is honestly, because I'm pretty clear about what your opinions are, but you're telling me that is reflected, that position is reflected in Irish media more broadly in a way that it's barely touched on here. Barely touched on.
It is.
Okay, that's really interesting. Another reason why we should all try perhaps to extend our source material a little, given the complication of the issues under discussion. Kieran, top man, thank you. Emma's in Market Harbour. Emma, what would you like to say?
Hi, it's kind of building on. Hi, James. It's kind of building on what your other callers have said, and just thinking back to how it's a path that they've been on and the excuses that have been made to the civilian deaths and atrocities. So starting off with, well, we're after Hamas, we want to release the hostages, and then moving on to to fast forward to the awful bombing of the hospital as well. Well, there were Hamas were in there, and then UNRWA as well had been infiltrated by Hamas. But now with this, they've even in there, to quote them, these were one of the good guys, this charity.
Yeah.
And the route had been planned, and it was a sustained targeted attack on that convoy. And now they've got nowhere to go. But this is, they've got no excuse this time. They are targeting.
And so I mean, even if the excuses had seemed increasingly flimsy, the idea that, apart from the people who go so far as to say there are no innocent people in Gaza, no, actually including them, the people who say there are no innocent people in Gaza. Even the babies deserve to die because they might grow up to support Hamas, or even the babies. Yeah. Even they can't defend this because it's 3 British former servicemen.
Yeah.
So the idea that they are Hamas supporters, or that they're going to grow up to be Hamas supporters, or that they are secretly corrupt, or that they are, I've got proof that they're Hamas supporters but they go to a different school, they're just all, that's exactly. So impossible that this becomes the utterly indefensible act.
So they've had to switch. They've had to switch their way. I mean, they've been dancing on a pinhead with the politicians and totally disagree with their stances on it. And I'm disgusted that we can still be, on one hand, selling arms to Israel, and on the other hand, trying to get aid in. And it's just bonkers, really.
Well, it is, and just another illustration, perhaps, of why people have been reluctant to come forward with their honest thoughts and convictions is a daily experience for me. So even now, in the last 10 minutes on Twitter, someone called Melissa Weiss, Weiss, tweeting that my critique yesterday of the Times of Israel's investigation into the background of Alan Levy, the suspended and now I think sacked official government spokesman, our critique of the Times of Israel's report into that prompts this woman to take to Twitter to accuse me of parroting Hamas talking points. Were you listening yesterday, Emma, to the programme?
Do you know, I missed it yesterday.
Well, that's a relief, because you managed to swerve a parroting of Hamas talking points by a journalist who was reading stuff out of the Times of Israel. Such is the I don't know whether you call it moral corruption or just dishonesty of people like Melissa Weiss, who's been tweeting that this morning. A Times of Israel report into a fired official government spokesman for Israel who had absolutely no qualifications for that role whatsoever, by his own account in this interview, gets translated on Twitter by someone obviously seeking to bring trouble to my door as parroting Hamas talking points. I've retweeted it from my account if you want to have a look for yourself, if you doubt I'm sure you don't, but if you did doubt the veracity of what I'm telling you. 10:45 is the time. 10:48 is the time. I think this Alan Duncan contribution merits a proper listen, a full listen, speaking to Nick Ferrari earlier today on LBC for two reasons. I mean, number one, it's newsworthy in and of its own for a former Minister of State of the United Kingdom, a Foreign Office Minister for Europe and North America, to intervene in such an outspoken fashion. And number two, it's a very strong illustration of what we're talking about today, the speed and the strength of the dilution in or disappearance of support for Israel's actions in Gaza. The last 48 hours have been extraordinary. Given that the death toll is in the low 30,000, 33,000 or thereabouts, the fact that 3 deaths could change the conversation in this country so completely merits further exploration. But have a listen to Sir Alan Duncan speaking to Nick Ferrari earlier this morning.
We should stop arms sales immediately. I think that anything in support of what is becoming a total catastrophe in Gaza is morally unacceptable. And what we have to accept is not just what they're doing now is wrong, it's what Israel's been doing for years has been wrong, because the Israeli Defense Force does not follow international law. It has been backing and supporting illegal settlers in the West Bank who steal Palestinian land. And it is that land theft, that annexation of Palestine, which is the origin of the problem, which has given rise to the Hamas atrocity and the battles we're seeing. The trouble is, there are a lot of people at the top of our own politics who refuse to condemn settlements and therefore are not supporters of international law. And I think the time has come to flush out those extremists in our own parliamentary politics and around it, some of whom are at the very top of government or have been, and they have never been called to account by journalists and the press to say, well, do you agree with your own party's policy? Do you condemn illegal settlements? And I will name them now in a minute, because they don't. And it's high time, I think, that they were exposed.
Go ahead. I'm not going to get in your way in the naming session.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, the Conservative Friends of Israel has been doing the bidding of Netanyahu, bypassing all proper processes of government to exercise undue influence at the top of government. So what you have is a lot of people now sitting around Rishi Sunak who are giving him appalling advice. Let's start with the head of CFI, or has been for many years, Lord Pollack. In my view, I think he should be removed from the Lords, because he is exercising the interest of another country, not that of the parliament in which he sits. Joined, I have to say, by Lord Pickles. They're the sort of Laurel and Hardy who should be pushed out together. But at the top, I mean, slightly improved by the removal of Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, although even today she is still supporting Israel and the bombing and the annihilation of people in Gaza. And she does not believe that settlements are wrong. Nor, I suspect, do Michael Gove, Oliver Dowden, and Priti Patel, by the way, should be reinvestigated for her visit. We still don't know who paid for her trip when she came back and tried to change government policy as a result of going on a secret trip without actually telling her officials or even the local ambassador. And if you pick up Wikipedia and you read the entry for Tom Tugendhat, who is our security minister, it says, and I'll read it out, he condemned the United Nations Security Council for its official criticism of Israel's building settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, that may have been some years ago, but he's never removed that. He's never changed his view. How can you have a security minister in the British government who does not believe in international law when all this is going on? I think he should be sacked.
10:52 is the time, and LBC has approached each of the individuals named here for comment and response. A statement from the Conservative Party says the Conservative Party has an established code of conduct and formal processes where complaints can be made in confidence. This process is rightly confidential. The Conservative Party does not tolerate any form of racism or discrimination. Am I allowed to say pull the other one? Have you seen who's in the Conservative Party at the moment? Well, if I'm not allowed to say pull the other one, the consequences of me saying pull the other one will be very interesting to discover. But all of the individuals named there have been approached for comment by LBC. It is exceptional to have a former Foreign Office minister speaking about his colleagues in those sorts of terms, incredibly senior colleagues. And to my mind, to my eye, he kept the receipts. Talking about honest Bob Jenrick and Suella Braverman still supporting Israel and the bombing and annihilation of people in Gaza, even after their tactics were responsible for killing 3 British aid workers. Priti Patel, of course, fired for travelling to Israel when Theresa May was Prime Minister and meeting with the foreign government and not telling anyone. I mean, genuinely. That was caught up in the Brexit madness, so it kind of got a free pass. But this is not normal stuff. You know, Brandon Lewis stands up in the House of Commons and says, we're going to break international law in a very limited and specific way. They were kind of talking about potato imports. But to be doing it on the world stage in the grimmest of contexts, that's generational damage, generational reputational damage. An incredible contribution, I would argue, from Sir Alan Duncan, and I don't think many would disagree. So why has this dilution/disappearance of support in the last 48 hours been so complete and so quick? Mohammed is in Stratford. Mohammed, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello.
I actually missed Nick's programme this morning. Normally, it's a platform for Israeli government propaganda.
Well, ring. I mean, with respect, Mohammed, ring him and tell him that. Yeah. With respect,
completely with respect.
Okay.
I think the reason things have changed is that, firstly, yes, they were British, and it is too close to home. 30,000 odd lives haven't mattered, but because these 3 were British and it is too close to home, yes, that's definitely changed perspective. And also, the Israelis have done this systematically. So they've hit one, then they've hit the second, then they hit third. And done it when apparently Netanyahu was in hospital having an operation or whatever. So thinking, I wasn't aware of it. So he could try brushing it off, which I don't think they have at the moment. But also...
What about... Let me... Just... What if this had happened in the middle of October of last year or the end of October of last year? It wouldn't have got the response that it's getting today, would it?
It probably wouldn't have. But these guys actually also helped Israel in October. So they couldn't, this agency couldn't be labelled as Palestinian.
You mean the charity went in as emergency response to the terror attack on October the 7th as well? So they can't be
completely condemned, and it shouldn't have happened. And Israel does have a right to defend itself,
of course.
But the British, for the British government, their official position on Gaza is that Gaza is occupied. That's the official British position. So we've been complicit in the terror crimes that Israel has been committing over the years, and especially since October 7th, in the view that it wants to defend itself. This is not defense. This hasn't been defense.
Since when? I mean, in the context of October the 7th, when did it cease to be defence and become something different?
Probably after the first lot of hostages were released. They could have carried on. So we always say, we don't negotiate with terrorists. So firstly, we say there's no Palestine. If there's no Palestine, then this is a civil war, and it's not. It's a civil war, so it's Netanyahu killing his own people if there is no Palestine. But then our official position is Gaza is occupied. So if Gaza is occupied, it's now he is killing his own people. So we've not been independent. We've always sided with the wrong person here. We shouldn't be sided with anybody. We should be siding with the Palestinians. We shouldn't be siding with the Israelis. We should be independent.
I think that's. I don't know that that's possible. I don't. I think that
it's not possible.
Supporting the sustenance of the modern state of Israel is a responsible and moral position. In existential terms, I think you're probably talking about support for the tactics deployed subjectively by Israel to protect itself. By wanting the state to survive and exist, you do not have to approve of what they say they need to do in order to ensure the protection and survival of the state. I just wanted to clarify what you were saying for my own benefit.
I completely agree.
That's what these people miss. These people queuing up to describe everybody criticising Israel as a Hamas apologist is that they completely miss the fact that the people they support are doing the most damage to their cause that we've seen in 60 years at the moment.
It is, and then again, we have to look at, everybody hates looking back at history because everybody just wants to look at October the 7th. But October the 7th wasn't the start. Let's not go back 50, 60 years. Let's go back 6 months and the attack at the West Bank and what the Israelis, the IDF, do to these people constantly, daily, and taking off, they're burning their olive groves and then poisoning their water or cutting off the supply of the water, everything. And we're complicit. We're complicit from Rishi Sunak's being complicit in this because of Gaza Marine 1 and Gaza Marine 2, where his father-in-law's company has been given contracts by BP for over $1 billion.
I don't think we need to bring that into. I don't think Rishi Sunak's position is motivated by the business interests of his father-in-law. I think it's well dodgy enough without having to bring in that sort of borderline tinfoil hat stuff, Mohammed. Don't you really, on reflection?
So Alan Duncan has revealed what he's revealed today. And it quite clearly shows where our position has been. Well,
where the position of the people he has named has been and the influence that he says they have brought to bear upon people like Rishi Sunak. I guess I'm just being very careful today because even as people throw around ridiculous and offensive insults, the only conscience that you answer to or I answer to is our own. And having the confidence to speak to your own conscience it's almost a revolutionary act in the British media at the moment, and never more so than on this subject, which is why I am so interested in what has happened to all the people who've suddenly discovered some semblance of conscience or some sort of, I don't want to say backbone, but I can think of no better word to describe what has been missing until this point. It's 11 o'clock. It's mystery hour at 12, remember, so there's definitely light relief on the way, but possibly not in the next hour. It is 4 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question of why this disappearance or dilution of support for Benjamin Netanyahu, for Israeli policy in Gaza, has disappeared so quickly. We'll continue for another 10 minutes or so. I want to take a couple more calls on this. My sense is that if you are listening to this with the heaviest of hearts, if Israel is your second home, or possibly a place to which you hope to move one day, if Israel possesses a place in your heart that is impossible, I think, for non-Jewish people to fully understand, to emotionally grasp, we can intellectually grasp it. My sense is that you're not yet ready to talk to me about how this makes you feel specifically, how this hemorrhaging of goodwill and support, affected, in my view, by Benjamin Netanyahu's policies, culminating in what has been laid bare by the killing of these 3 British aid workers, what that has done to you emotionally, I genuinely dread to think. But my sense is, looking at my inbox and the calls that have come in the last couple of days, that you might not quite be ready to go there yet. We may go there tomorrow. It's entirely up to you. But I just want you to know that you're in my thoughts. It must be awful to reach that point where you think, God, we have somehow managed to become the bad guys. And what I mean by that is, or the people I am talking about and to, are the people who didn't really ever think that was possible. And there'll be plenty of people who still don't. They're the people calling me Jew hater or Hamas apologist on social media. But I don't mean them. They're lost to reason, have been perhaps forever. And I understand why. I empathy, perhaps, rather than sympathy. But people who just never really thought, and I think the British media is full of people like that. Not Jewish people, but people who just never really conceived of the possibility of Israel becoming the bad guys, especially in consequence of the atrocity of October the 7th. How could any political leader somehow use that as a starting point for a journey which brought his own country into bad guy status? And I'd refer you back to the headline in the Daily Mail, of all places, where they talk about the killing wreaked on innocent people outweighing the original sin. So the actions of Israel, according to Stephen Glover, one of the most vampiric of Daily Mail columnists, the actions of Israel have outweighed now the actions of Hamas on October the 7th. Now, in terms of simple human casualty, that's been true for months. But something about the killing of these 3 aid workers has brought it into the forefront of the thinking of people who would once perhaps never have thought it possible. So that may be for tomorrow, maybe for next week. Lee's in Belfast. Lee, what would you like to say? What made you pick up the phone?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, James. I live in Northern Ireland in quite a loyalist part of it, and when January, February, if you know, well, probably a bit of context, if you don't know, a lot of loyalists associate themselves with Israel, and January and February, there were a lot of Israel flags that went up. During my walk to the gym, I would say there were about 15 to 20 popped up. And of course, a couple have come down over the last number of weeks. I'd say it has gone to about 10 last week when I had
an Israeli flag, even in January and February, could have been an expression of solidarity with the victims of the October the 7th terror attack. But there is, of course, that thin line between that and then support for whatever Israel was doing subsequently.
Yeah, I agree on that front. But the only reason I mentioned that is because last night I was walking down the gym and I noticed that all of them had gone.
Oh, gosh.
And the reason why I think it is because the one time you'd see more flags than that is probably around Remembrance Day.
Yes.
And a lot of they should not be forgotten. And I think it's a lot of people are taking anybody who are very pro-Israel or also probably very pro-military.
Right.
And when they heard that they were British military veterans who had been killed, that I think is what's caused probably them to probably turn their back on the sport, or if not, just reduce their support.
You cover a lot of ground there, and you bring the element that perhaps we haven't touched on yet today, which is it's the military background of the 3 killed men that has moved some of the feeling that seemed most stubborn. And there are a few feelings more stubborn than a loyalist in Northern Ireland at this point. But to move them, it is the killing of former British soldiers, specifically soldiers. So we're moving beyond British in a way. It's like a refinement of British. A British soldier, a former British soldier, that changes everything.
Yeah. And to get
of course you're right.
To get the antithesis as well, I also do have a lot of friends in the Republican areas, and the Palestinian flags have only just increased in number. I was only there on Sunday, but the pretty much at least one on every street, especially if you go around the university areas.
Yeah, I mean that's extraordinary, isn't it? It really is. And of course, I guess the mistake I've made this morning is thinking that there was some sort of homogenous reason, some homogenous reasoning, but but there isn't. The different positions on a personal level and on a political level, and that's why that text that I read out right at the top of the show from someone who both trained with and served with one of the killed aid workers was so powerful. Thank you, Lee. That was a little shiver then when he just said all the flags have come down, and that's what I was talking about, or at least trying to talk about, when I was describing the horror that you must be going through now if you're not on the extremist wing of support for Israel, but it is a crucial part of your identity. It is the place where you will go when the persecution begins again. That's always been the phrase, if you like, in my head that I find most poignant. And to feel the hemorrhaging of support, whether in a stark and simple way, like flags being taken down in an area that would once have been violently supportive of Israel's rights to defend itself, up to and including the events of the last 6 months. I don't know. As I say, I'm not sure you're ready to have that conversation yet, but when you are, I'm here. Sam is in Golders Green. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Thanks for taking my call. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Just want to start by very briefly expressing my admiration for yourself being the absolute bastion of reason and free speech.
Well,
and
I'm doing
keeping
my best, but you're very kind. Thank you.
No, I've seen over the past few weeks, I've been a regular listener, and I've seen absolute loonies come at you with all kinds of allegations, and you've been very, very graceful and magnanimous, and obviously, picking them out and obviously breaking them down, and
Sure.
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
James, I'd like to say that. A couple of points on how this has come to boil, as one may say,
yes.
And why has it been simmering at the surface, or has it been deep-rooted? But I think, look, yes, I would like to use the term the murder or assassination of free British ex-servicemen has hit home for a lot of people. But I would like to give the British public a lot more credit than this. If we were to, just for the sake of a neutrality and level playing field for this discourse, take the starting point as the 7th of October. You and me both know that's been happening for long before that. But let's just take the 7th of October. A lot of public opinion has swayed since then because of the sheer brutality of the campaign. And as you had rightly iterated, yes, several calls, several hours, not least yesterday when you were trying to fight off Trevor, was the fact that people are now have been really shocked. They've been willing to express their opinion. Obviously, Israel is an ally, a partner for the West in the Middle East for several decades. No one's disputing that. But the sheer brutality of this campaign by this particular regime has shocked people to the core. Now, while several neutrals, several people who are on one side or the other wanted to speak out and have spoken out, I'd say the majority of listeners have chosen not to speak out for the sake of offending someone such that was displayed by a couple of Roberts ago in your call, saying that you can't do this conversation without offending someone.
No, well, and being called a Hamas apologist or a Jew hater, I don't know that I would ever want my skin to be so thick that doesn't at least resonate on some level. I don't want it ever to silence or quieten me, but these are not throwaway comments, even as people insist on throwing them away.
They're preposterous allegations at the very least, James, and anyone with half a brain cell can see that you're the most neutral individual at LBC and one of the most prominent journalists in British journalism who've taken a level-headed stand on this. No, absolutely, James. Look, I mean,
anyway, carry on. Yes, go on.
2 points I wanted to make here, sir, is the reason why it's come to fruition, this level of disdain at the killings of the ex-service military men, and obviously the poor souls who were in the convoy, is because the large majority of the British public have been silenced. We've been censored by this extremist, I'd like to use Mr. Gov's own words, this extremist government, using several tactics and nuances to silence this. I mean, for instance, Suella Braverman calling these hate marches.
Yes.
Exactly. Rishi Sunak coming out in a conference to call out that when there's several other policy topics he could have come and addressed, the joblessness and millennials.
You have official spokespeople spokespeople for the Israeli government describing everyone on the march as rape apologists, and then popping up the next day on the BBC and LBC and ITV.
Exactly. Discussing allegations. So large majority of us have been silenced into submission because we're fearful of being called either, unfortunately, that you've bravely faced, of being Hamas apologists or anti-Semites. The term has been weaponized to silence the majority. Now, what this has done, it's led to a pent-up feeling of emotion, a moral obligation that's been suppressed, and large majority of British people now feel vindicated in their own morality to say, well, that's what we've been feeling along, and this goes to prove that this barbaric regime takes no prisoners, serves no allyship to any country, not least Britain, and they can get away with whatever they want. And the fact that the British government has given nothing but lip service till date, I'm hoping that stance changes, just goes to show how much of a leash they've given the
and that's
Israeli
why
attention.
Alan Duncan's words were so important, stroke interesting today. I'm struck by your analysis and the sense that what we are describing and what perhaps we've been describing for 2 days now is culmination, not aberration.
Exactly.
The Israeli position will depend upon getting the idea of aberration inflated and afloat, and there will be people prepared to help in that process. Is it plausible, do you think? Do you think that they might be able to change the direction, given the context and environment that you've just described? They might be able to steer traffic away from culmination and back towards aberration?
Regretfully, we're 32,000 lives too late for that, James, and that's the problem. Look, I think the problem with the rhetoric that we have in our great country, and it's a great country to be in for Muslims, for Jews, for Christians. The British Red Cross, several other organisations took birth. Charity took birth. Everything took birth in this country. And in this great country, for us to be stripped of our ability to have a level-headed political discourse is the biggest travesty.
I hadn't thought of it in that. Well, I kind of had, but I don't think I've articulated it as well as you have, Sam. That sense of our free speech being compromised.
Absolutely.
In the context of this very specific conversation. Thank you, Sam. Taking me right up to the break and beyond. I just want to add some words from Peter Ricketts, the former diplomat and vice chair, of course, of the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies. But glancing at the clock, I'll read you that in full after this. It is 19 minutes after 11, and it may be tomorrow, perhaps, that we can begin to have that conversation about what Benjamin Netanyahu in general and the killing of these three former British servicemen in particular have done to decades of carefully cultivated concern, support, belief in the modern state of Israel. As someone who needs it in your life, you need it in your emotional armory to deal with the knowledge of history and the fear of the future. It is 20 minutes after 11, and we move on to something completely different now. But before we do that, have a little listen to this.
Ridiculous report from some lobby group yesterday saying price of food will go up. It'll go down.
Our food bills will be lower. Our energy costs would be lower. Our tax bills would be lower.
Outside the EU, our food bills will be lower. Our fuel bills will be cheaper. Our taxes will be lower. I think people will be better off in terms of their household budget.
You know, I just thought of that for two reasons today. One, speaking about, and Sam put it brilliantly, didn't he? The manipulation, if you like, of news coverage and the way that voices are silenced or that full stories and details don't come out. And the other was that they have now released the details of the border charges that everybody importing goods into the United Kingdom from the EU will have to pay. So I would say, and I haven't checked, but that was probably the three musketeers of idiocy, wasn't it? It was Rees-Mogg, Carswell and Hannon insisting that food would be cheaper. You're looking at about up to about £145 per consignment now to bring stuff into this country that would have cost absolutely nothing previously. A company that has been listening to this program and contacting me from pretty much day one, a company called Seeds of Italy, looking at what this is going to mean for them, and they reckon it's £146 customs fee and £142 to test each seed variety in one shipment. So meat, dairy, fish, horticulture, plants, seeds, chocolate, honey, all of these things now to be subject to huge tariffs or charges, inspection charges. They're not technically tariffs, but those three people who told you that everything would be cheaper. One of them is in America now, running a think tank. One of them is in the House of Lords, and one of them is still doing penny farthing impressions in the House of Commons every day, and he's been rewarded, of course, with his own television show. So, being completely and utterly wrong about a matter of supremely important national interest through the distorting lens of Brexit earns you rewards. Absolutely extraordinary. We need a funnier phrase to describe. It's not the three musketeers of idiocy. We need something a little better than that. The three, that's a bit rude. But Rees-Mogg, Carswell, Hannon there. Have another listen to it. It's just because I'm telling you now, if you're in the business of bringing meat, dairy products, fish, horticultural plants, whether seeds, chocolate, honey, anything that is, if you like, susceptible to disease or causing illness, you're paying hundreds of pounds now that you never had to pay before. But here they are.
Ridiculous report from some lobby group yesterday saying price of food will go up. It'll go down.
Our food bills will be lower. Our energy costs would be lower. Our tax bills would be lower.
Outside the EU, our food bills will be lower, our fuel bills will be cheaper, our taxes will be lower. I think people will be better off in terms of their household budget.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Carl's been in touch to say, you're losing the runes, son. Stick to the Gaza story. I'm afraid that the role of the British media in persuading the British people to support the unsustainable, to defend the indefensible, and indeed to vote on occasion for entirely against their own interests is runs through both of these stories like Blackpool through a stick of rock. Okay, complete change now. There is a story which has been around for a while. The Telegraph choose to lead with it today, about judges considering more lenient sentences for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. The Sentencing Council has spelt out what mitigating factors might look like: difficult and deprived background or personal circumstances. I suppose if you want to take it to one extreme, you would say if someone is starving and they steal food, should they be treated the same as somebody who is quite wealthy and steals food? Well, so that would be a really good way into this if you're interested in actually thinking about it. Someone is genuinely starving, or someone hasn't got any formula for their baby and can't breastfeed for whatever reason. So are there circumstances in which you would expect a judge to take background or mitigating factors, personal circumstances, into account when sentencing? And the answer to that is, of course there are. Unless when we were deporting people to Australia for stealing an apple from an East London costermonger, then you would have been not only cheering the deportation, but probably in the front row for the hangings at Tyburn as well. Thank you for all your suggestions about what I might be able to call Carswell, Rees-Mogg and Hannan as a sort of collective noun, but absolutely none of them, especially yours, Philip, are repeatable on national radio, or indeed local radio, or indeed any radio that is even remotely regulated by Ofcom. 25 after 11. And I've got a brief story to tell you about the opposite extreme, which involves my last brush with the law, as it were, when me and some friends were expelled from school for cannabis consumption, and my two of my very close friends ended up in court, where I think they were charged with intent to supply, and they received character references from all manner of the great and good, up to and including the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, Basil Hume, in a London courtroom, giving a character reference written. I don't think he turned up, I could be wrong, because these lads went to the school that he'd gone to, the school where he'd been headmaster and the school where he'd been abbot of the monastery, and they received a conditional discharge. So it seems to me that our judges already take background and personal circumstances into account when sentencing, but that our system generally provides leniency for people who've enjoyed privilege. If two lads from South London who were charged on the same evidence with the same offence had ended up in front of the same judge, A, they wouldn't have got a character reference from the Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster, and B, I don't think they would have got a conditional discharge. That was certainly, if my memory serves me correctly, that was certainly the view of the investigating officers. So the Daily Telegraph and, sundry other predictable voices trying to turn it into something that it isn't, I think, because already judges will take personal circumstance and even background into account when sentencing. It's just that usually it would be privilege that made them, well, there's no point sending this young man to jail. There have been some extraordinary examples of it, haven't there, over the last few years. Most recently, it was the fellow, was he up on terrorist offences? And the judge told him to read more Jane Austen because he'd been to private school. Did I imagine that? Am I dreaming this? Do you ever do that? Do you ever think, did that actually happen? The last few flipping acts since 2016, almost every story I can remember makes me wonder whether I was tripping at the time or actually listening to the news. I'm pretty sure there was a tale of a terrorist convicted of terrorism offences, I think. And the judge said he needs to read more books. And that's precisely how some judges think. This lad went to a school like mine. There's no point sending him to jail. Hey, he'll be much better off just, reading some Thomas Hardy. So it happens. And then if you're really crass, simplistic, and hold your readers in the lowest regard, you'd pretend that this in some way says to people from a less privileged background that they are allowed to commit crimes. You'd pretend that this is some sort of invitation to... Listen, I'm not making this up. These people exist, and they often have columns in papers like The Sun and The Mail. Oh, well, this means... So letting off wealthy people because prison wouldn't make any difference and there's no likelihood of them reoffending is absolutely fine. But going a little leniently on offenders who had a tiny fraction of life choices that some of us enjoy, that would be absolutely wrong, and it would send entirely the wrong message. And they never say this bit out loud. It would send entirely the wrong message to the lower orders. Do you know why it happens? It happens because if you can't admit advantage, then you can't admit disadvantage either. So if you can't acknowledge that your success in life or your children's success in life is built in large part upon where and when they were born, the wealth of parents, the private education, the privilege that is usually paid for or inherited. Some people manage to breach the barricades. They manage to storm the citadel. They manage to grab it for themselves or their children, despite not coming from that background. My parents being very much an example of that. But if you can't admit the advantage, if you don't think that it's an unfair advantage that you enjoy, and I've got Jacob Rees-Mogg in the back of my brain again. If you think Jacob Rees-Mogg would have achieved what he has achieved in life if he'd been born on a sink estate in Toxteth, then I've got several bridges that I'd like to sell you. But these people can never admit their advantage. And if you can't admit advantage, unfair, then you can't admit disadvantage. So the only circumstances in which you could have a problem with a judge thinking, well, look, your decision to commit a crime has obviously been informed by your circumstances, your personal circumstances, the difficulties that you have had in your life, which is why you deserve a less strict sentence than the person over there who was given everything, silver spoons galore, and they've committed the same crime. Who deserves to be treated with leniency, the person who's lived a life of privilege or the person who's lived a life of deprivation? Well, obviously it's the person who's lived a life of deprivation, but to pretend otherwise is to accidentally give away your conviction that neither advantage nor disadvantage exist, and that the rich man in his castle and the poor man at his gate are there because God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. One of the most unchristian things that you could ever believe. So I know what you're thinking. Where the hell is this going as a topic? I want you just to tell me about why your background contributed to your criminality. And don't hold back either. Why you know that if you'd had my background, you wouldn't have ended up in jail. It's that simple. How do you know that? Or why do you think that? If you'd gone to, a very prestigious school, you'd had advantages that other people can only dream of, you wouldn't have gone down the road that you've gone down. Because it's so bleeding obvious, isn't it? That I'm amazed it needs explaining, but apparently it does. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Lottie Morley is here now with your headlines. 26 minutes to 12 is the time. I do sometimes approach stories like this from a very personal perspective, in that I'm fascinated by people who either can't see what is obvious or pretend that they can't see what is obvious. The Daily Telegraph today being the case in point, judges to look at soft terms for deprived, in quotes, offenders. Critics say guidance from Sentencing Council is patronising and inaccurate, and that means they've phoned up people and encouraged them to say that it's patronising and inaccurate. Here's a story from 2017. I don't know if you remember this one. Lavinia Woodward, 26, was given a suspended sentence in 2017 after she admitted slashing her ex-boyfriend with a knife after taking drugs and alcohol. At the time, her defence claimed she would be allowed back into Christ Church College, Oxford, because she is that bright, although the university stressed that no decision would be made. And the judge decided that in order to preserve her promising medical career, she should be spared jail. So there is the example of a judge looking at the circumstances and background of an offender. In this case, a medical student at Oxford University who didn't go to jail for slashing her ex-boyfriend with a knife after taking drugs and alcohol because of her background and circumstances. Gilded, privileged, and destined apparently for a career in medicine. There are plenty of other examples of this. I'll find you the one about the terror bloke told to read books shortly, or in fact you can find it if you want, and then just WhatsApp it to 03456060973, which is where I was reminded of that story there. So from the other side, what does it look like? How do we know that background and personal circumstances contribute to criminality? And I'll use myself as an example. If you had my background, are you pretty confident you wouldn't have ended up in jail or in trouble with the law? 03456060973. How does it work? Harold's in Finchley. Harold, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Good morning. I have I've spoken to you a couple of times before on other subjects, but this is a subject I had to pull over. I was very passionate about.
Okay.
Only for 3 or 4 years, I've been involved in a charity, which I can name if you want, won't name if you don't want, that helps prisoners get back into the workforce. And that's and the program includes me being one of their lecturers and then an individual mentor for them as we get them back into the workplace.
Guess who's coming in later to do full disclosure for next week?
Who?
James Timpson.
Ah, well, James Simpson knows me well.
Well, isn't it a small world, isn't it, Harold?
It's a very small world.
Anyway, carry on.
I did not have... I had a decent background, not particularly privileged, and I built and sold a business, and this is what I do with my spare time, work for a few charities. But this one really captured my imagination. I'm going to tell you a statistic. Every single one of the people I've mentored, when you hear their life story, you think, yeah, I can see that I would have made those choices too. And some of those choices ended up in very dark, bad places and in jail for many, many years. And now we're trying to get them back into life, which is not just back into work, but back into life. There isn't a single set of circumstances where if you're genuinely empathetic and put yourself into their circumstances, you would have made any different choices. You're 100% right.
Well, you're like me then. In fact, I'll tempt you into the territory I mentioned a moment ago. It's so obvious to me that I struggle to understand anybody who denies it or pretends that they don't understand it.
It was obvious, but now I've got a couple of dozen prisoners examples to kind of go with. And it's true in every single case. You're talking about, foster parents who abused, who were cruel to them, and they got involved in gangs. You think, if somebody put their arm around me when I was 10 and said, nick that bloke's phone and I'll get you the trainers you look so naff in not having, I've got to tell you, James, I would have done the same in those circumstances.
I'm always struck by how quickly we move away from our own youth. I caught myself rolling my eyes the other day at some kids smoking weed by the river, and the person I was with quite rightly pointed out that I absolutely was in that kind of category of youth when I was their age, and you forget the ease with which you can fall into bad behaviour and the protection that privilege gives you when you do, and if you do.
Correct. And on the other side of the fence, I have known very privileged people whose fathers have got them incredibly expensive lawyers and spent fortunes on blocking out everything on Google, and hey presto, they re-emerge into life.
Yeah. Well, so let's look at the site. Where does it come from then? If you were writing a column for the Daily Telegraph today about how this will encourage people to commit crimes, or it sends the wrong message to people from, don't mention all the wealthy people or how much lawyers cost, or the woman who was spared jail because she was a promising Oxford medical student, or the fellow who was told to read more Jane Austen because he went to private school. Where does that come from? Where does that psychological position come from?
Well, I think you put it absolutely perfectly. If you deny privilege, then you've got to deny that there's any underprivilege. It's absolutely clear as day. I can't believe anyone would debate this.
No, I
look
can't.
forward to the rest of the phoning. I can't believe anybody would debate this.
Well, I don't want to debate it. I allow myself very occasionally. Thank you, Harold. I shall pass on your compliments to James Timpson. I'm really looking forward to this interview. I sometimes allow myself not to really debate things. If you think this is an appalling idea and it's grossly unfair, and it's perfectly right that judges should let off Oxford students from jail, but send down people from underprivileged backgrounds with alacrity and severity, then yeah, I mean, you are more than welcome to ring in. But I'm really interested in the reality of your life, your position. If you're the kind of person that Harold has worked with, and a prisoner who knows, maybe you don't know if you're in it. Maybe it's one of those things that you only know the road you're on. You don't know what the road not taken would look like, or indeed that it would have made all the difference. The idea that you would not have ended up in the mess that you ended up in, or the trouble that you ended up in, if your background had been a bit nicer, a bit easier, a bit more advantaged. I'd love to explore that. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I found it. Here it is. A neo-Nazi terror offender was spared jail and ordered to read Jane Austen. Received a suspended prison sentence for possessing a terrorist document in August of 2022. I thought this was quite recent. And the reasoning, if I remember correctly, was that the judge didn't really think he was the sort of chap who should be sent to jail. He was acquitted on 6 other accounts of the same offence after saying that he didn't know what the documents contained. He was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. And it was, unless you give me an understanding now that your interest in far-right ideology ends today. And just memory serves me correctly, it had something to do with his background. Maybe it didn't. But the case of the medical student certainly did. It's coming up to 11:45. So give me a ring on this one. Mystery Hour coming up at 12. It's either from Harold's perspective or, of course, from the perspective of somebody living it. What I want to pin down is the relationship between lack of privilege, lack of advantage, deprivation or difficulty in background, and a softer sentence. That the reason why, if you've had a really, really difficult life and you end up in court, you should be treated differently, a bit differently. We're not talking about letting anybody go or go unpunished, but you should be treated a bit differently from somebody who hasn't had particular difficulties in their life. It's not just about money. Harold touches on security, support, functionality in a family. But if you end up in court having come from a really difficult background, you should be treated differently from somebody who ends up in court after coming from a really healthy and positive background. I don't understand how that can be even momentarily controversial, but if you do, give me a call, 0345 6060 973, or if your story is very pertinent to this issue, to this story, then give me a call as well, 0345 6060 973. Nora's on the Wirral. Nora, what do you think?
Hi, James. I think that privilege shouldn't be taken into account. I think a crime's a crime. If it were to be taken into account, I think there should be heavier penalties for privileged people because they've got less excuse.
Well, that's the same, though.
That's
the same as what's being suggested. This is
inequitable, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're just so lower sentences for people from difficult backgrounds versus higher sentences for people from privileged backgrounds. It ultimately boils down to the same thing. So you do think it should be taken into account?
Well, it should be, yeah. I think when the mitigation comes in, I think the mitigation for somebody who's privileged and doesn't have to struggle is kind of less compelling, really, isn't it? Mm. So, but because in my experience, my son was expelled from a school.
Oh, yeah.
And the person who was sort of instrumental in making that decision, the chair of governors, he was found later to be innocent and there was nothing to it, but he lost a year and he was reinstated, but he didn't want to go back because he was so traumatised, and he lost a year of his education. And the same person who made that decision had a daughter who got blind drunk and drove the wrong way 7 miles up the motorway, but then got a suspended sentence and was reinstated as a teacher.
We know that there is a two-tier system, and it is almost entirely built on background, and yet the suggestion that they should do it the other way round has caused a clutching of pearls and a spitting of dummies on the main story, the front page of the Daily Telegraph. It's a funny old world, Nora, isn't it, sometimes?
It is true.
And there are plenty of other examples coming in. This from I Am Incorrigible, who I haven't heard from for a while. 2 greedy RBS bankers who used their jobs to run a £3 million property fraud escaped jail because the judge says they, in capital letters, have suffered. You couldn't really make it up. And my own example from my own schooling, my own teenage years, I think is pretty powerful as well. You look me in the eye and tell me that if 2 lads from a sink estate in Toxteth or Telford had ended up in court with the CPS and the police believing they had a very, very strong case for a serious sentence, getting a conditional discharge after and I'm glad they did, by the way, because they're my mates. But I think it's pretty conclusive proof of a two-tier justice system. So what exactly prompts people to object to the idea of softer terms for people who've got more excuses for having ended up in trouble? 11:46 is the time. 11:49 is the time. I mean, I share your bafflement, actually, at how anyone could have a problem with this. Because even if you're just looking at how much lawyers cost, your background and your circumstances already have an enormous influence on what sentencing you are likely to achieve. Why do you think some lawyers earn obscene amounts of money? I've got no problem with that, for the record, except for the bit that follows, which is because they are more likely to get you off, even if you're guilty. Just a quick memo to self: do not use any examples at this point in this conversation, James. Because if they can afford a lawyer that gets them off charges, they can certainly afford libel lawyers. But you have probably got some examples in your own mind of people who have got off charges that seem to you to be open and shut cases. And in all of those cases, the accused will have had the very finest legal support that money can buy. And that, of course, is not available to the massive majority of us. So already your background and circumstances are having an impact on your sentencing. So how anybody could pretend, A, that it doesn't already happen, and B, that it would be bad to actually throw a bone to the people with the least advantages going into court is currently beyond me. Maybe you'll be able to help. Rebecca's in Greenwich. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Hi, I wanted to ring because I just wanted to scale it back a little bit. So yes. My background is social worker, mainly worked in education, worked with, the kind of most challenging young people in educational settings. And when we're talking about school and education, we talk about taking a trauma-informed approach. So not a one-size-fits-all approach. We consider what a child is existing with at home or what a child might be thriving with at home and how that might impact their decisions at school, how much agency they have, what that looks like for them. And what you're saying about, people having access to very, very expensive solicitors, lawyers, X, Y, and Z, for me is massively reflective then of young people and how accessible their parents are. So I've worked with so many young people who have had all sorts of traumatic experiences, which are reflected in their behaviour, and then they're facing long-term permanent exclusion, X, Y, and Z, which, just can have, as we know, such a long-term impact on their potential. But those are the kids whose parents, when you ring their parents and say, please, can you come in? We'd love to work with you. We'd love to have a chat. We'd love to get things moving. Their parents are also not available. Yes. So there's a reflection there
It's a brilliant example. How much, in your experience, when these decisions are being reached by school leaders or others, how much attention is paid to what you described, to what we could loosely describe as domestic dysfunction?
So in school, we'd say taking a trauma-informed approach. There's lots of literature and research written on it in relation to adverse childhood experiences. I think it really depends, who's signing off on your decisions each day. I had some
so
days
it's
where I'd go to
subjective. Some will be on the ball and
Totally.
some just won't.
Totally. And also, let's also acknowledge that in schools, most senior leaders I've worked with are white men. Lots of young people I've worked with are young black children, young black boys. And unless they've got an awareness of systemic racism and their social graces, then it's barely a starting point.
It's a piece in the Mail today, which is odd. Oddly, it's not necessarily something that I'm allowed to snigger at. Maybe you are. Nobody Gives a Damn, writes the brilliant author Louis de Bernier, and he's writing about a book that's just been written by Diana, Princess of Wales's brother, Charles. Nobody gives a damn what happened to posh boys like me, and he chooses to call him Earl Spencer, who were so cruelly abused at school. And he talks about when the head beaters, we had to say thank you, sir, which happened to me as well. I mean, middle-class men in therapy will be cheering what you've just said to the rafters.
Yeah.
But the idea that it should be taken into account when dealing with working-class kids who are in trouble is apparently controversial.
Agreed.
It's madness. Absolute madness.
I agree. It's madness.
I mean, I guess what you need is a way of illustrating the path not taken, don't you? The child, who the child would have been if they'd had a functional family, and that's hard to do.
Absolutely. And also just thinking, I don't know how accurate this statistic is right now, but I know in 2015, 17, when I was training as a social worker, children who went into foster care were more likely to go to prison than university. And that has never left me. That's crazy.
I know, and then there it is.
Crazy. And that's the adverse childhood experience that a lot of people are then dealing with as adults,
And then you look at the statistics on literacy and special educational needs, ADHD and others in the prison population, and recidivism, and things become even clearer. I've upset a lawyer, which is always dangerous. Rebecca, thank you. No, James, the best criminal lawyers will be working daily on legal aid and thus be available to anyone. We are paid a fixed fee per case. Please stop. I don't think I said criminal. But maybe I did, in which case I bow to your absolutely correct contribution and apologise for my misspeak. But that's why I couldn't give you examples, because the people I've got in the back of my mind who got off in circumstances where most observers thought they were as guilty as sin, they were definitely paying huge amounts of money to their lawyers. But I don't want to upset any lawyers any further, because I might need you one day. Johan's in Ware in Hertfordshire. Johan, what would you like to say?
So, first-time caller, long-time listener. I think this is a difficult problem, but I think longer sentences is not necessarily the right thing to go for any class. I think appropriate sentencing. So, basically, based on how much you got to lose, in a sense. If you're a hardened criminal, then you got less to lose. If you're a professional, young professional, senior professional, then you have more to lose, and you should have effectively a shorter custodial sentence.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, that's pretty much how things are now. So you're in favour of the...
No,
they are. The Oxford medical student who was spared jail after slashing her boyfriend with a knife while drunk and high on drugs, precisely because she had more to lose and the judge didn't think it should be taken away from her. That's what you're endorsing.
No,
I misunderstood.
That's not what I'm endorsing. What I'm saying is, yes, she should. The sentencing guidelines should be that she still gets a custodial sentence, but it's shorter. Not that she gets away with it. That's a difference.
Oh, okay. Well, shorter than someone who isn't an Oxford medical student but has committed exactly the same crime.
And that's where it gets really difficult. But I think...
Well, I'm just checking that's what you're saying before it gets really difficult. That is what you're saying, isn't it?
It's based on what you got to lose. It's based on what the impact of someone's life.
I respect your honesty and your clarity, actually, but I think that we are in danger of sounding quite snobbish here, you and me, because losing your liberty is you're talking about material middle-class advancement being more to lose than somebody in a blue-collar job or somebody from a less you are, whether you intended it or not. That's how it's come across, mate. I promise you.
Okay, well, because the point isn't the class system. The point is, if you're a hardened criminal who's been in prison before, you have less to lose. If you're the first-time offender, then
the first-time offender, perhaps, and the idea that the sentencing should reflect the possibility of re-offence, and if that possibility is quite low, then well, then you could turn it around again, Johan, and say, well, if he's been in prison loads of times, then sending him to prison obviously isn't working either, is it? So why on earth would we do it again? He's back in front of us. He was here last 10 years ago, got out for 10 minutes, and now he's back in front of us again. So prison hasn't worked on him. Why would we send him back there again?
That's more a question: should prisons be rehabilitation, or should it be penalty?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the question. Why didn't prison work? Is a very different question for a much longer discussion.
It is. Well done. Thank you for providing a little bit of production input towards the end of your contribution there by noting the time, because it is very nearly 11:59. It is also Thursday, which means it's nearly 12 o'clock on a Thursday, which means it's very nearly Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction that is not available anywhere else on your radio dial. My apologies to everybody. It goes a bit mad at 10 to 12. Jess in East Grinstead, I wish I had a little more time to talk to you about this, but I don't, sadly, because Mystery Hour is upon us, and my switchboard is now being swamped by people who I presume are keen to contribute to Mystery Hour, even though I haven't sent out the invitation yet to contribute to Mystery Hour. But I'll do that shortly. Well, that actually sounded quite professional, didn't it? Well, I said I'll do that shortly, and then the music kicks in. But how many times have we actually done that on 5900? I can tell you exactly how many times we've done that on 50. Once. You just had the privilege of witnessing it. Mystery Hour, if you're not familiar with it, is many people's favourite hour of the week that we spend together, because it's funny and sweet and a little bit silly. And sometimes we need that even more than we do the rest of the time. Some people ring in with questions, and then other people ring in with answers. And somewhere between those two relatively simple propositions and outwardly quite banal propositions, magic can happen. And if you don't believe me, then collectively we're about to prove you wrong.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial is upon us. If you've got a question that needs answering, a mystery that needs solving, a conundrum that needs unravelling. I've run out of verbs, because I was going to say an enigma that needs curing? I don't know. Curing rhymes with churing. Just putting it out there. Then this is your opportunity to do so. And if you like demonstrations of knowledge, and indeed if you enjoy indulging in demonstrations of your own knowledge, then you are encouraged, passionately encouraged, to ring in with an answer to one of the questions that is asked. To do either of those things, you need to ring 0345 6060 973. As things stand, I don't take contributions during Mystery Hour via any other media. So not even via WhatsApp. But if you send me something funny, I may read it out. But I won't take questions or answers, usually. The good news is there is a Mystery Hour board game for the provider of my favourite contribution of the day. And you can find out more about the Mystery Hour board game. If you're not lucky enough to win one, you can buy one at mysteryhour.co.uk. And there is no bad news. So there's two lots of good news. The first bit of good news is that you can win a Mystery Hour board game. The second bit is if you don't win one, you can buy one. And the third bit of good news is that there is no bad news. The full terms and conditions for this competition are at lbc.co.uk. Shall we crack on? Has anyone noticed I've got a tickly throat today? Have I managed to cover it up? I know you have, because you've seen me cough, Keith. I'm talking to people who can't currently actually see me. Have I managed to cover it up successfully? Do you know how? I've got throat spray, fresh pineapple, and a smoothie. And I've also got a cough button, which has come in very useful. But usually when I've got a tickly throat, you can tell. I think today I've covered it up quite well. I could be wrong. I just mention it because it's getting quite bad now. Nina's in Manchester. Nina, question or answer?
Hello, I've got a question.
Carry on.
Okay, so I've been watching Gladiators every Saturday on the TV, and all the Gladiators have names like Legend and Bionic and Electra.
There's not. Is there one called Bionic?
There is.
Is
I
there?
think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to know, in the Roman times, did the gladiators have names when they entered the arena?
Well, of course they must. How? I mean.
No, but names like Legend or Fury or.
Oh, as opposed to John or Maximus Fisticus.
Yeah.
Nicknames, you mean? Stage names or nicknames?
Stage names, yeah.
I like that. That's a good question. I don't think so. Qualifications, I studied Latin, but who knows? I mean, you'd have thought... Well, the generals had nicknames, so that generals would be known as things like, Slayer of the Etruscans or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't... I like it a lot. What will it change? How often do you think of the Roman Empire, Nina?
Not every day.
I don't know why that's funny, but I know that it was a thing, wasn't it, last year?
It was.
I don't know why it was a thing. I don't know why it's funny, but I kind of had a sense that Nina would get it, even though I don't. 6 minutes after 12. Did gladiators in Roman times have nicknames, stage names, showbiz names, like Iron Hammer or something like that? Vikings did, I think, but they weren't. That was in war rather than in gladiatorial conduct. And thank you, Martin, for reminding me of some of the names popularised by Monty Python's pastiches of Roman life, which I can't read out on the radio either. Chris is in Stoke Newington. Chris, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
Why is it that when you're bilingual, you seem to have a different pitch or tone of voice between the languages that you speak? In one, you're usually higher, and the other, you're a lot lower.
Which one are you higher in?
I'm higher in Portuguese than I'm in English.
Ask me that question again in Portuguese, please.
Por que a gente tem tom diferente de voz entre as línguas diferentes que a gente fala?
You went deeper.
Oh. So that oscillates.
Well, I think you definitely went deeper then, not higher. But it's still, your question still stands. Let me try. Mila, ligo. No, I did that on purpose. Then I've got to try.
That's the thing. If you think about it, you do on purpose. But I have a 4-year-old now.
Yes.
And he's bilingual from birth.
Don't tell Nigel Farage. You'll try and get him deported.
Oh my God.
Don't worry, I'm joking for now.
Yeah, it's funny to see him talking because he changes words in the same phrase. And when it's Portuguese, it's higher. In English, it's lower. So oh my God.
But I mean, if that happens to everybody, maybe Portuguese is just spoken in. No, it can't be. Do you have any sort of Barry White type people in Portugal?
I don't know.
People who talk like really deep voices in Portuguese, or is it a language that lends itself to a higher tone? So I'm just going to try a bit of Greek. I speak a little bit of Greek. Θέλω να πας στην Ελλάδα πάρα πολύ. I go a little bit higher in Greek, I think. Είμαι πολύ κουρασμένος σήμερα. I am very tired today. Mate, I don't. Well, we'll find out. I mean, you might be talking gibberish, Chris.
I don't know. I have a lot of friends that are bilingual, and they have kids that are bilingual.
And you've all noticed it?
Yeah, and we all discuss about why is that?
You're on.
Is it just, okay.
What's Portuguese for gibberish?
Blah, blah, blah. We usually say blah, blah, blah.
That'll do. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Philip's in Sandhurst. Philip, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Me and you both grew up in the 70s. There wasn't a lot for a little lad to do in the 70s.
Oh, tell me about it.
Only 3 channels on the telly and all that. But
did you ever get Crossfire? Did you ever get Crossfire?
I didn't have Crossfire, no. But I had the Harrier jump jet.
Blimey.
The one that you strung up to the ceiling and it went up the string and down the string.
Okay.
That was pretty admired by my mates.
Novelty wore off quite quickly, though, didn't it?
Yes.
I mean, that's all it did. Crossfire, you could have a fight. You could have a fight with Crossfire. You could play each other. I loved Crossfire. Anyway, and do you know what happened? Do you guess what I bought when I won the premium bonds, Philip?
I don't know.
What was the game you didn't have? Some people, I'll give you a clue. It wasn't Big Trap. It wasn't Big Trap.
No.
You sound bored with this. We are going to get to your question eventually.
I'm just reminiscing.
Okay, so what was the game? The game advertised? No, higher than that. Advertised on telly. Your parents probably couldn't afford it. Mine said they couldn't afford it. Ooh. And then I won premium bonds and I bought it. What do you think it was? Advertised on the telly, like the game that you couldn't believe how cool it was, and also the technology involved.
That would be Simon Says.
Oh, that's quite strong play. I never got one of them. Tin Can Alley. Do you not remember Tin Can Alley?
Oh, yeah, that was pretty good. You pulled a string in this.
There wasn't any string, Philip. That's your jump jet. There wasn't any string. It was a photoelectric cell, I realise now.
We had it tough in our house, mate. I don't know these games, the ones that cost...
Well, I won the premium bonds. I bought myself a racing bike from Woolworths. And Tin
You
Can
didn't
Alley.
let it change you.
I didn't let it change me. It was one of the best days of my life, that. I mean, unbelievable. I thought that I was like Mustafa Millions out of the Whizzer and Chips comic. I don't think I've ever felt as flush as I felt that day. Anyway, can you remember why you rang in?
No, not really, but it's nice having a chat. No, go on. Two things I like to play with under the covers at night when I was a little lad in the 70s.
Listen here, it's not that kind of show.
Don't worry.
Oi.
Don't worry.
All right.
One was my little transistor radio.
Yes.
And the other was a torch, of course. And all boys like a new torch. And with a new torch, with a really, really like big bulb in it and a big battery, you could shine it on the back of your hand in complete darkness and see the bones in your hand.
Mm.
And this perplexed me and enthralled me. So my question is, could you have a light, i.e. a torch, that was bright enough to be able to see all your skeleton in your body?
Wow. So if you like one of those spotlights that's pointed at Windsor Castle or something like that, if you could somehow get close enough to stand right in front of it without setting fire to yourself, would you be able to see the outline of your skeleton?
Like I could when I was a little lad, I could see the bones in my fingers with my new torch.
I like that one. Hello, you're on? Okay. Can we find out about Philip's bones, please? 03456060973. So we've got the tonal languages. Why do people who speak two languages often go up a tone or two when speaking one of them? Did gladiators in ancient Rome have their own stage names? Like, I can't. All I can think of are rude. I can only think of double entendres. I can't say those out. Like Bionicus. And is it possible to shine a light so bright upon your own body that you can see the skeleton underneath? Perry's in Canary Wharf. Perry, question or answer?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, James.
Hello,
I have a question about sniffer dogs.
Oh, yes.
So I work in Canary Wharf. I'm here at the moment, and I've noticed quite a few sniffer dogs around recently. I can only assume that they're here to detect explosives. It's quite a high secure area.
Yes.
On holiday recently, going through Heathrow, more sniffer dogs. I can only assume that they're for drugs, maybe for explosives, for all I know. And of course, you got that in the medical profession as well. Nowadays, you have sniffer dogs detecting different things. So my question is, how specific is the training for sniffer dogs? If you take, say, the ones that detect drugs, do you only train them for the most obvious stuff rather than the more obscure drugs? I don't know what an obscure drug is. I don't know. LSD, for example, or I don't know. Those sort of ketamine.
What have you got? Perry, what have you got planned, mate?
No. I just
no, officer. No, someone must have thrown it into my pocket, officer.
Well, I just need an answer before
what?
Before the
what?
Before the delivery comes.
Yeah, there it is. So I know what you city boys are like. So you want to know whether a sniffer dog I mean, how many drugs? You're not asking whether the ones that do drugs also do explosives.
Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
I can't imagine LSD has much of a...
I have no idea. I've honestly got no idea. So kind of what happens? How
what can a sniffer dog sniff?
Yeah, exactly.
How much stuff can a sniffer dog sniff when a sniffer dog sniffs his stuff? That's your question.
I wouldn't want to say that myself, but yes, exactly.
There we go. How much stuff can a sniffer dog sniff? 03456. That's a good question, Perry, but please be careful. It's coming up to 12:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. How much stuff can a sniffer dog sniff when a sniffer dog sniffs his stuff?
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
12:15 is the time. On we go. Adam's in South Woodford. Adam, question or answer?
James, I have a question.
Carry on.
So my question is, when a high street of shops is created,
yes,
or you have a residential road with houses, how is it decided which end has the low numbers and which end has the high numbers?
What I mean, mate, what makes you think it is decided? It could be fairly random, couldn't it?
I don't know. All I know is when I walk my dog on our estate, I go down side roads, and sometimes it starts with a low number, and sometimes it starts with a high number.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not alternative, so I just don't know.
Order they were built in?
Don't know.
No, I know. I'm just thinking out loud. I like that. It's a good question. Numbering streets, high streets. How do they decide where a street where a new street starts?
No. When the road is created, but how do they decide which end are going to be the low numbers?
Yeah, but that's where it starts. That's like number one is the start of the street. So how do they decide where a new street starts? So you've got a street. Yeah, okay. You're right. I mean, we've done stuff similar to this before. Back in the day, councils play a big role in naming streets, and the post office, I think, plays a role in numbering. I could be wrong about that. So we want to know who numbers new streets.
Yeah.
Cool.
And wish your throat better.
Thank you very much. Can you tell, honestly?
I did notice, actually, yes.
All right, then. Never mind. I thought I was doing so well. Thank you, Adam. Jeff's in Bishop Stortford. Jeff, question or answer?
Question.
Yes.
Good morning.
Hello, Jeff.
James.
How are you, mate?
Good morning.
Afternoon.
Not too bad, thank you. Why do we still speak with our hands?
You mean gestures?
Yeah, gestures. And I think, well, if you stop listening to the mouth, you can't understand what the hands are saying anyway.
Why do you use the word still, Jeff? What is it about modern life that makes you think we might have done away with hand gestures by now?
I don't know, James.
But
I'm hoping you're going to answer all this.
But a hand gesture is, it emphasises, doesn't it? I do it quite a lot, and I'm on the radio, Jeff.
Yeah, you do. On the radio?
Yeah, I do it on the radio. Hi, YouTubers. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. Like that thing. Do you want to say hello to the YouTubers, Jeff?
Yeah. Hello, YouTubers.
Thank you. Say, don't forget to subscribe.
Okay, I will.
No, you say it.
I'll subscribe. How about that?
That was brilliant. You're a natural. Have you done this before? Have you done any voiceover work? Thank you.
No,
please, thank you. So what's the question again? Why do we use hand gestures when we speak?
Yeah, what do we use hand gestures when we're already talking to the people?
All right.
You see it on all programs.
We want an anthropologist or an evolutionary... we want someone to explain it with more than me just saying, well, it helps you emphasise stuff, don't you?
Yes.
Jeff, leave it with me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's 18 minutes after 12. That was a short break. I keep thinking I'm late for the break, but it was just a short break that we've come back. Oh, I ruined it there. There was no hiding that, was there? Blair's in Edinburgh. Blair, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Blair.
What it was I've had family over a couple of weeks ago, and we were discussing halal meats.
Oh, yeah.
And next day, my Facebook had all these adverts about halal meats, but nobody Googled anything or anything like that. I'm just trying to understand how it could possibly have happened.
Well, I'm torn here, Blair.
Okay.
I'm torn between wondering whether or not this question should have been allowed on, which is fine. It's not your fault. But also thinking that you're right, because everyone thinks this has happened to them, don't they? I'm not specifically with halal meats, but you have a talk about a trampoline, and the next thing you know, your Facebook is showing you trampolines, or you, and I presume you've got some devices in your house, like an Alexa, have you, or something like that?
Yeah, I've not.
A smart TV.
I don't. Yeah, I've got a smart TV. Yeah.
So that's what you're thinking. We are suspicious that someone is eavesdropping on us and then using it to curate our social media to sell us stuff.
Yeah, but how would that actually work?
Well, I don't think it does happen, but we all think it does, which is why I worry that you shouldn't have been allowed on, because it might all go a little bit chemtrails.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean, yeah. It's just very, very strange.
It is very strange. Is it possible that they are listening to us? That's the question.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd get a direct answer on that or not, but...
Well, someone who works in the sector will know. I mean, but would they be allowed to tell us if they were?
I'm not sure. I'm just asking the question.
Shall we try it out now?
Of course we can.
All right, air fryers.
I'll need to call back tomorrow and see if it's
Have you got anything yet? Have you got anything yet, Blair? Air fryers.
Nothing yet.
I bought a lovely air fryer. Blair. It's a Ninja. I bought myself a Ninja air fryer. It's got 2 compartments in it, and I am cooking up some delicious grub in my new air fryer.
Oh, you're awful posh with your 2 compartments.
Thank you very much. You're not wrong. I am a connoisseur of air frying. Let's see what happens to our social media, yeah?
No problem.
We've got till 1 o'clock. Got 40 minutes to get the skates on. Thank you, Blair. Joshua's in Ealing. Joshua, question or answer?
It's a question, James. So my question is, when a person has an operation and they need a blood transfusion, obviously they get the blood from a blood bank. How, if an animal needs a blood transfusion, where do they get the blood from?
Oof. Well, I mean, that must be the same, mustn't it? There must be animal blood banks.
But we don't take our dogs to go give blood, do we?
Well, you don't. You don't, and I don't, to be fair. My dog's so small you'd barely get a pint out of it. But there must be perhaps other people who do, other dogs who do. No?
Well, I've never heard of it.
No, nor have I. But I mean, I'm just working on Occam's razor. There must be, if our biology is correct, and animals do in fact receive blood during some medical procedures, blood transfusions, then there must be a store of blood. There just must be, like night follows day. No?
Well, I guess so. So I guess the question is, do we have blood banks for animals and dogs and things?
Yeah, there it is. I presume so, but we need some proof, don't we, Joshua?
Yes.
Right, you're on. 0345 606 0973. Is our smart technology listening to us and therefore putting things in front of us on our social media that they have heard us talk about? I know it's a bit tinfoily, but you'd be amazed how many people have already texted me. Are there blood banks for animals? Where do they get the blood from if an animal needs some blood during a medical procedure? Why do we use hand gestures when we are perfectly capable of explaining ourselves verbally or vocally? How do they number streets, new streets? Where do they decide which end is 1? How much stuff can a sniffer dog sniff when a sniffer dog is sniffing stuff? That's about, the array. Do the same dogs do drugs and explosives? And can they do all drugs? How many drugs can they do? Is there a light? Can you get a light so bright that if you stood in front of it, your endoskeleton would become visible? I may have just misused the word endoskeleton, but I couldn't resist the opportunity. Why do bilingual people often speak one language in a higher and or lower tone than the other language? And did gladiators in ancient Rome have stage names? That's a lovely selection of questions, all of which need answers. On 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Paul's in Cardiff. Paul, question or answer?
I'm answer today, James.
Carry on, Paul.
So the question about sniffer dogs.
Oh, yes.
So I had the very fortunate job once upon a time, about 18 years ago, of working at the Defence Animal Training Centre in Melton Mowbray.
Oh, cool.
Where we were responsible for training all of the MOD's dogs, which was an absolutely fantastic job. And the answer to your question is that, yes, dogs can be multidisciplined. They're usually for ease, single discipline, so a dog would be trained on drugs or cadaver, currency, medical, arms and explosives. But they're trained on specific substances.
Okay.
So as long as the dog has access to that specific substance to be able to sniff it, pretty much any dog that has a high drive for the ball and wants to please their owner, their handler, they can be trained to detect pretty much anything. It does take a long time to train these dogs.
I'm sure.
And so the more substances that you're training the dog on, the longer the training will take.
Does it get easier? I mean, is the first one the hardest? And then after that, you can just add things to their palate that...
Yeah, that's basically it. So it takes about 6 months to train a very high specification dog. So something that's detecting drugs, for example, or arms and explosives, or currency, etc. Take about
currency even. So you could. So LSD probably has an aroma of some sort, would it or not? I don't know.
Yes, yeah. As do physical notes that we're going to the airport with.
And there's no limit on how much a good dog can do. How much stuff a dog can sniff. A sniffer dog can sniff stuff.
I don't think there's a limit on how much stuff a sniffer dog can sniff. Theoretically, but obviously we want the dog to be really more accurate with a fewer higher.
Okay. So you train the dogs accordingly and specialise, as it were.
A more refined palate.
Qualifications, I know you've told us, but you have to go through the motions.
Sorry, repeat the question.
Qualifications?
For
this. How do you know? You've already told me, but you have to tell me again, because that's how it works.
Great. 2006 to 2008, I was very fortunate to be one of the officers responsible for dog training at the Defence Animal Training Centre in Melton Mowbray, which is hundreds of really hard-working military folk training thousands of dogs every year to go all over the world to do this work.
Oh, brilliant stuff. A round of applause. Thank you, Paul. Great stuff. Laura's in Haringey. Laura, question or answer?
Answer, please.
Carry on.
It's about the why bilingual people have a different tone in different languages.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So basically, each language is positioned in a different part of the body. Each language is pitched differently. Some languages are pitched quite forward, like near the top of the mouth and the nose. Some languages are pitched kind of at the back, and some languages tend to be slightly higher in the head. So each language has a tone that belongs to that language. In fact, some languages are tonal and they have different tones that belong to that language. But in the case of Latin languages, for instance, like Italian, Spanish, or Portuguese, they tend to be pitched more forward and they tend to be slightly higher. Oh. And so like when I speak in English, for instance, I have a lower tone than when I speak in Italian. And when I'm an actor, and when I had to learn English, like to act in English, one of the main things wasn't just pronunciation, but was where to pitch my voice and where to position it. Yeah. So basically, you really feel it inside, like your palate and your mouth, where it's like a little bit like singing. You know, you can belt or you can have a head voice, and it's the same thing with languages. Each language is positioned slightly differently. So it sounds different.
I think that's...
It wouldn't happen to you because you would apply the way you speak English to any language. But it would apply
so you have to be genuinely bilingual then?
Yeah. You have to be native speaker or completely bilingual so that you can switch. And when you switch, you feel that the voice comes from somewhere different, pretty much.
Yeah. No, I get it. Qualifications?
Well, I'm a voice actor, I'm bilingual, and I also teach voiceover.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause for Laura, please.
Thank you.
Oh, lovely answer. Thank you, Laura. I just need to write your name down. That was Chris's question, wasn't it? And there we go. So that's why he's 4-year-old, and indeed you've got to be properly bilingual, not just... So which means, I think, thinking in two languages rather than just translating it in your head and saying the foreign words out loud, which I can do a bit. Peter's in Staplehurst. Peter, question or answer? Oh, shall I squeeze Peter? Yes, I've started, so I'll finish. That's a different quiz. Different game, I think. Question or answer, Peter?
Answer.
Carry on, mate.
To the street numbering.
Ah, yes.
The numbers start, certainly for the London and around London area, the low numbers start near the centre of London. So if the post office determines numbering, the post office determines what postcode you have. Not only is the low numbers nearest the city, but on the left-hand side is always the odd number. So number 1 will always be on the left, 3, 5, 7, and 2, 4, 6, 8 will always be on the right as you look up the road from the low numbering.
And by the town or the city, do we mean the GPO or do we mean?
I would certainly for London, it's the city. Yes. It would be the city.
But some roads are going to be horizontal to the city, if you see what I mean. They're not. There's not.
Then the post office would have to make a decision.
So just make a decision on it.
Yeah.
And we presume that the same thing happens in other areas, other towns and villages.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Manchester would have its own catchment area, and it would all focus on the central point. The centre of London is near Charing Cross Station,
and it's the post office that does it, that determines the numbering in the street. Qualifications?
37 years, started off as a postman, ended up as principal technical product consultant for the post office.
Well, there you go. Round of applause for Peter. What is a technical product in the context of the post office? You mean like new stuff?
My team, I headed up the team that invented the barcoding system. We had to invent our own barcodes. Yeah. If we used the baked beans tins barcodes, it would be far too long to go off the end of the envelope. So we had to develop our own barcode, and then machines would have to read it. Optical character recognition machines would read it. I'm talking now about old stuff. I left 22 years ago, retired. So I'm talking about old technology, but certainly the number in the streets has been for
timeless, time immemorial. Lovely stuff, Peter. Thank you. 12:31 is the time, and Amelia Cox is here with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
12:34 is the time. We've got questions remaining about whether or not gladiators in ancient Rome had stage names like the ones off ITV do now. What, you mean that's not his real name? Bionic is not his real name. I thought it was two words. I thought it was Irish. Bionic. No, leave it, Jess. Seriously. It lights bright enough to show your entire endoskeleton. Is there such a thing? Done the questions, thanks to Laura. Done the numbering streets as well. But that was Peter, wasn't it, who answered Adam's question? Why do we use hand gestures when we can speak? Is there a relationship? Can they hear you? Like your smart TV or your Alexa device, when you have a conversation and then it seems coincidentally something you're having a conversation about appears on your social media adverts or something like that. So many people have told me this has happened to them. I think it's happened to me, but has it actually happened to any of us? And is there a blood bank? Are there blood banks for animals? If not, how do they get the blood? Where do they get the blood from when an animal needs a blood transfusion? Nathan's in Portsmouth. Nathan, question or answer?
It's a question, James. So the word Dutch.
Yes.
Let's say I said, how about you and me go out for a nice meal, James? But
Yes.
I'm a bit skint, so we'll have to go Dutch.
We'll have to go Dutch, yes.
And then after that, you want to buy my bathroom because I sell bathrooms, and you start bargaining on a price, and I say, listen, mate, I'm not getting involved in a Dutch auction with you.
Fair enough.
And then after that, we go and buy an antique, and we say, this is a bit of a Dutch auction is going on here.
Yeah, that's
And
the
you could
same
have
one
a
as the
Dutch
last
uncle.
one. That's the same one as the
That's it.
last one, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then you got Dutch uncle, Dutch courage.
What's a Dutch uncle?
I don't know, but I've heard the expression, but
Okay.
Dutch courage.
Yeah. Dutch courage. So why do we use the word Dutch? We don't.
Why
There's
do we
no
use
other
the word
word.
Dutch?
Yeah.
Well, in those sort of contexts, going Dutch is obviously completely unrelated to a Dutch auction, Dutch courage.
Yeah,
There's even a Dutch pot, a Dutch cooking pot, but that might have something to do with the shape of it.
You probably don't know this. There's no reason why you should. But I read a lot of historical crime fiction set in the 17th century, right?
Yeah.
I'm currently enjoying S.W. Perry's series. In fact, I'm enjoying it so much, he got in touch and sent me a couple of the last 3 volumes in the series, so that's my reading sorted for the next couple of months. And I recommend them very highly. And we don't realise the demonisation of the Dutch that was commonplace in this country at that time, partly because of trade, proximity. I think the Dutch got blamed for the Great Fire of London in much. But imagine the Dutch as the 17th century equivalent of Muslims today. And they're routinely denigrated and blamed for things they haven't done, or just immigrants
But these
in general.
are not negative contexts, are
Double
they?
Dutches.
Okay.
No, but it probably goes back to the 17th century when, and it may have been a negative then, but it isn't a negative now. That happens quite a lot with the derivation of language, with the development of language.
Okay.
So I don't know, but I would not be surprised if the word 17th century appear somewhere in the answer.
Lovely.
I shall do my best for you. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
How's the bathroom business?
It's all right. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. The wonderful world of bathrooms. Obviously, there's a lot on the news, isn't there, about building and extra building and extra housing. So
you need a bathroom. You got a house. You need a bathroom, Nathan. That's one of the great truisms of life. 12:38 is the time. Ian's in Warrington. Ian, question or answer?
It's an answer, please, James.
Carry on, mate.
It's about the pet blood bank.
Oh, yes.
There definitely is, because our dog's registered on it.
Oh, well done.
We've got a very big dog. That's why a lot of people won't know about them. They've got to be, I think it's over 20 kilos. Ours is about 28.
Yes.
We were at a country fair, like one of these sort of, horses and all sorts of stuff with the dog. And there was a gazebo there with some very nice ladies, and anybody that went past with a large dog,
they
were approaching them and said, "Would you be prepared for your dog to be a blood donor.
Oh, needs to be a big dog. Of course it needs to be a big dog.
Yeah, there's a weight limit, So they took our name. We got a call back from them later. We were sent to a very big veterinary practice in the area. And they had a whole sort of setup there, a big team of people. The first time you go, they try and see if the dog's calm enough. Ours wasn't. They give you training material so you can train him to be calm.
Yes.
And they call you back every so often. We've only done the first stage so far.
But you're up for it.
Trial one. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I like that a lot. And do you get paid, or does the dog get a biscuit?
No, the dog gets a biscuit and a toy.
That's all right, isn't it? And there it is. So we don't know much about it because it doesn't happen that much, but they do need a supply of it for when it does.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about small animals, obviously, but there's the weight limit, and they're quite strict about it. If you take an amount of fluid, it's going to make the dog weak, I assume.
Well, you get nothing out of mine. You get nothing out. I mean, when she's had a shave, when she's been to the groomers, she's all scared. She'd wash away in a rainstorm. What is the name of the What's the name of the organisation? Can you remember?
I can't. It's called something like Pet Blood Bank or something. I can't actually remember the name of the organisation,
but it's there, and they're real, and they're doing your stuff. Qualifications cleared up already. Ian, round of applause. He's got a big dog. A big dog who is gearing up to give blood. Steve's in Barnsley. Steve, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James. Afternoon.
Hello, mate.
A few years back, I used to work in a call centre that would sell flights, seats on flights all around the world.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure you're aware, a man of your knowledge, I'm sure you're aware, all airports have got 3-letter codes.
Oh, yes.
So, to be boring, London Gatwick's LGW, London Heathrow, LHR, and so on, and they all realistically, they make perfect sense when you look at them. You can normally work out where they are.
Yeah.
But all airports in Canada start with a Y.
Really?
And I just wondered why the Y.
Why?
Because I remember Toronto was YYZ. And when I asked my supervisor at the time, her response was whoever they were, forgot about Canada. And I can't really accept that as an answer.
No, so it's boring and not boring at the same time. This question, isn't it?
Yeah. I was going to go with the not boring, hopefully.
Well, it isn't boring now you've asked it, but I saw it written down on the screen. I thought it might be. It's why is it only Canada that do that? Is it, I mean, almost everywhere else you're going to be able to recognise the city from the name of the airport, the airport code.
Yeah. More often than not, the letter sequence would make sense, even if you couldn't necessarily work it out. But the likes of John F. Kennedy's JFK and so on, so at least the letters would be in the right order. You might not be able to work it out, but at least the letters would be in the right order. But Canada, they all start with a Y.
Why? Okay, you're on. We shall try and find out why. Why, Steve? And someone will know. Hopefully they'll get in touch before the end of the programme. 12, which means you've got about 18 minutes, not including breaks. Rory's in Birmingham. Rory, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Rory.
Just wanted to know what the average height of the clouds off the ground are in the UK, please. Just whatever the average clouds are, just the average height off the ground.
What do you mean? So you've got to measure all the clouds?
Well, no, whatever.
And then divide it by... What is an average cloud?
Well, I don't know, the most common cloud.
What do you mean the most common cloud? What's a common cloud?
Well, a common cloud, like a grey one, generally grey, isn't it?
Well, that's why. Well, so you can't go for the colour. It's usually the shape, isn't it? Like nimbostratus or something like that. Or
yes. But whatever the most common
the average height of a cloud
off the ground.
Why do you want to know this?
I was so curious. It's been bugging me for years. And I asked Google once, and it came back with some weird answer, so I thought I'd try you.
Okay. Well, I'm touched by your faith. How high is the average cloud?
Pressure.
I tell you what, if anyone answers this, I'll give you the money myself. Thank you, Rory. How high is the average cloud? 0345 in the UK specifically. Don't want any of those foreign clouds. It's got to be the UK. 0345 6060 973. David's in Birmingham. David, question or answer?
I'm not sure I can follow that, but there we go. It's an answer.
Carry on, mate.
It's to the gladiator question.
Gladiators! Yes.
Something like that. Yes. They did have names.
Shut up.
So, there's some graffiti in Pompeii that has a Thracian gladiator called Hilarus and some other gladiator names.
Yeah, but that was his name. That wasn't a stage name.
No, it was his stage name. See, how do you think they'd know about him if they didn't know his name? It's graffiti. It's scrawled on a wall.
No, I know, but that's probably what his mum called him.
Well, quite possibly, but that's not necessarily. But
but that wasn't the question.
Because they would know, but they were famous for it.
No, I know.
He was a famous gladiator, and
his name was Hilarus.
Yes,
but the question was, did they have like the equivalent of names that gladiators on the telly have, like?
Well, it's possible that Hilarus wasn't his real, but you
it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, all I know is that certainly at the moment we.
It's a lovely answer. Listen, you're going to get a round of applause anyway, but I don't think you've satisfied Nina.
Well, all I know is that these days we do, because I used to do reenactments and I used to fight as a gladiator, and I have actually fought in a Roman amphitheatre under the name of Bulbus, which isn't my name. Bulbus. So yes.
I like that. Why, you big lad, are you, David?
I'm a big lad. We have actually met briefly.
Okay.
but yes, I'm a big lad, and I also like to make people cry. So yes, it's an Odeon thing.
I like this.
Yes.
What did you wear? What did you wear when you were?
Well, I was a Thracian, so I wore essentially gladiatorial underpants called subligaria.
Yes.
I wore leg guards, padded leg guards. So, basically like cricket keeper pads, essentially.
Yeah.
And a dirty, great big helmet that is almost impossible to see out of.
Oh, well, yes.
And I used to fight a lithe young chap who was a retiarius who had a trident and a net.
How vicious did you get with each other?
Oh, well, I used to kill him regularly, and he used to kill me regularly. So,
and where did you do this? In Rome?
I did it not in Rome, but I have done it in the actual Roman amphitheatre at Caerleon in South Wales near Newport.
Oh, that's exciting.
So I can send you a video. It's great. It's actually one of my photos on the web is of me killing Steve.
Don't call him Steve. Dave, don't call it Steve. Don't spoil it. Killing Thracius Minimus.
No, I was the Thracius. He was the Retiarius. He's the
killing that old pesky I hate those Retiarians. Seriously, what have they ever done for us?
Well, they're quite literally pesky, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly that. I loved it. Where did we meet? At my Birmingham gig, was it? Or...
No. I bumped into you outside the office actually after I'd seen the one of the Ogwyn shows at Leicester Square. Yeah, I just happened to be in Leicester Square, lovely so we had a little natter. You did look quite scared when I approached and said hello, but
that's because you were dressed as a Roman gladiator, mate.
Almost certainly. It was the pads that did it, wasn't it?
Round of applause for David.
Thank you.
12:47 is the time. Have we had a break yet, or are we going for a break now? We're going for one now.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 10-1 and you're listening to Mystery Hour. We need quite a lot of answers still. I'll just tell you what I've written on my piece of paper. You know what the questions are. If you don't by now, it's too late. Bones and lights, hand gestures, halal meat and smart TVs. We've done the animal blood donors. That was a nice one. Bathrooms. Why have I written down bathrooms? Oh, because Nathan answered the question. I just wrote down bathrooms. I got confused. Canadian airports, beginning with Y, and the height of clouds. Is that all? Is that everything? I think it is. Richard's in Shrewsbury. Richard, question or answer?
I've got an answer.
Carry on.
It's actually gladiators.
Oh, yes. I thought we'd done that.
Well, I thought you were saying that you weren't satisfied with the answer.
No, I said Nina wouldn't be satisfied, but it's the same difference. Right. Well, you're going to go further, are you?
I'm going to absolutely confirm that gladiators did have stage names.
Fantastic.
The vast majority of gladiators were slaves, and the owner of the slave could call them whatever they wanted. And they would do so, and that would depend on whether they wanted the gladiator to represent them as a goodie or a baddie to some extent, or what the purpose of the gladiator was. And so they'd probably get their name after they had fought a few times. Well, I suppose you don't name a slave if they're going to die straight away.
No, so you just like sponsorship in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like having your name on a football shirt.
Yeah. They like some members of society would want to name their gladiators after members of the imperial family of the time to kind of get favour, or equally they would name one that they thought was going to die or was set up to die as an enemy of Rome. So you'd get gladiators called Thrax, as your last caller mentioned, is the name for Thracian.
Love it. Qualifications?
I research. I love all things Roman. I think about the Roman Empire many times a week. But,
why is that? So one day that'll come up on Mystery Hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until then,
I was researching it to make a tabletop war game.
Oh, cool! And did you make it?
No, I switched to pirates and made one about pirates instead.
What's that one called?
It's called Pirates of the Dread Sea.
Like it.
Yeah, it's all fantastical.
You're not really supposed to plug board games on this programme.
Well, it's not a board game so much as a war game, That's different. Yeah.
Have you seen the Mystery Hour board game ever?
I've seen it. It looks fantastic.
Yes,
it looks great.
I'd
recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, same with your Pirates of the Dread Sea. Round of applause for Richard, please.
Very much.
Ree's in Bethnal Green. Ree, question or answer?
It's actually an answer, James.
Yes, carry on.
So the answer with regards to the halal meat and smart TVs. So the reason why he might be seeing it is because he's probably on the smartphone.
Yeah.
And like most people with smartphones, they like to install a ton of different applications. And what people don't seem to realise is when you install these various applications, I won't name the ones that I've come across, but the various applications, when you hit that big, long user agreement, and you have to either accept or scroll, if you actually read some of those points, you actually give permission in the application to access your camera, listen to your microphone, or they can actually, in some cases, read some of your recent SMS messages. So quite naturally, if I've spoken to you and I found something really great, and I've sent you a quick SMS, and one of my applications has access to read my SMS messages, guess what? They'll know exactly I'm talking about it.
And that goes back. That goes back to whatever algorithm is feeding adverts into your Facebook.
Yeah, it's connected to everything else because everything else that you have in your house, everything's connected. Your smartphones, your Wi-Fi routers,
even
all
your
of
fridge
your
these days.
TV box, your fridge, coffee machines, even. So, as well as it's great of having all these IoT devices around your house, it's also really important to understand that it's not just you who's got access to these devices. Most of these applications.
Qualifications?
I work in cybersecurity. I've done so for the last 15 years.
So, absolutely. I mean, this is a completely kosher explanation.
Well, it's just the kind of research that I've come across.
Yeah, no, I do, because you can see that it's plausible and tinfoil hat at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those ones. But yeah, next time you decide to install an application, just have a quick skim through that agreement and just.
But if it's asked me if it can have access to my microphone, then it's usually an app that I talk into.
Sometimes, but you'd be surprised at some random apps.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell the producer off air what the worst offenders are? Because you don't want to say it. Why don't you want to say it on air? Don't say it until you tell me why you don't want to say it on air.
I won't say it on there just because I'm in the industry. I don't want to put any red flags out, but I will tell the producer offline.
Okay. Stay on the line. Eleanor, get this man's details, all right? Because I'm quite relaxed about this. If I'm talking about it, I quite like the fact that Facebook knows that I'm in the market for a new trampoline or an air fryer. But usually, round of applause for Ree. Usually, I've already bought it by the time my feed fills up with adverts, which is just stupid. Because you've expressed an interest in something by buying it, and then you get bombarded with adverts for it for the next 6 months. Mark's in Albury. Mark, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James. It's an answer.
Carry on, Mark.
It's the answer to the airport question.
Oh, yes.
So, in brief, before the three-letter codes were adopted worldwide, each country had its own system. Canada used two-letter codes based on the weather station that each airport had. So they've actually named after the weather stations.
And they all started with Y?
No, they just used two letters, so VR for Vancouver, etc.
So then they needed to turn it into a three-letter one.
And Canada, so the question was actually slightly correct in that Canada was a late adopter. By the time they got round to it, most of the good letters are gone.
What's a good letter?
Apart from it, well, the appropriate three-letter codes are like V. So
the third letter. The first letter. No, not the first letter, because there's more than one L. There's LHR and LAX.
Yeah. but they couldn't have used, say, VAN because that was being used for someone else.
Vanuatu, probably.
And so because Yerevan was the only major airport starting with a Y, they said, we'll just use Y. And so they just added Y to all the two-letter codes, turned them into three-letter codes.
Qualifications?
I worked in the travel trade for over 30 years selling flights, and as a project at work, I was asked to load all 9,200 airports into a new database.
How long did that take?
About 2 weeks.
Good Lord. What was your favourite?
There's an airport in Alaska.
Yeah.
Three-letter code EEK. It's actually called EEK.
Love it. I knew you'd have a favourite. Everyone always has a favourite. If you have to spend 2 weeks doing something, then something's going to stay with you, isn't it? You're going to have a favourite.
Absolutely. It's lovely to speak to you again. We met in Wolverhampton. You signed my book.
Oh, thank you, Mark. How kind of you to remember, and indeed to have bought the book and come to that. I enjoyed the Wolverhampton gig a lot. It was a lovely evening, wasn't it?
Yeah, we talked about mental health. You were very appreciative.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for reminding me. And have a round of applause on me.
Thank you very much.
And stay safe. Take care. It's 12. Can I squeeze in one more? Keith's in Upminster. Make it snappy.
Okay, James, it depends on whether winter or summer to start with, because in the summer, the cloud base, minimum cloud base...
Oh, you gave it away, because no one knew what you were talking about. I know you said clouds. I wanted to see how long you could carry on for without anybody being entirely clear about what answer you were actually providing. So how high is the average cloud?
In the winter, maybe 600 to 1,000. In the summer, 2,000 to 3,000 for the lowest ones, and they can go right up to kind of... Hello?
I'm here. I'm listening to you, Keith.
Yeah,
honestly, I get told off for interrupting, and then I get told off when I don't. It's no pleasing you people.
Summertime lowest is about 2,000 to 3,000, maybe 5,000 in a really hot summer day.
Yeah.
Wintertime could be as low as 300 to 1,000, and it varies a lot.
Qualifications?
I'm a former glider pilot, former powered pilot as well. And clouds are very important to glider pilots.
Pilot in command.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Keith.
And I did my first solo in Cosford.
In where?
Cosford, which is not that far from Kidderminster, I believe.
I was going to say, well, Halfpenny Green is the big airport around us, but Cosford for gliders, is it?
Cosford. Visit the RAF base, but I did my first solo flight there in 1980.
Well played, Keith. You got yourself a round of applause as well. I'm spoilt for choice this week on favourites. I think I'm going to give it to Mark, who I saw him. Was it Mark from that I saw in Wolverhampton? Who was it a minute ago? I think, Mark. Mark in Albury gets it this week. Well done, Mark. That's it from me for another day. We will be back tomorrow from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, Tom Swarbrick. But now, Sheila Folk 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 now,